avec le père Alex Ojacor et le professeur Madjawa qui vont nous présenter leurs recherches sur le thème de la maturité spirituelle pour un leadership transformationnel dans l'Église. Pour un premier tour de table, pour vous deux, juste 2 minutes, si vous voulez bien vous présenter et nous dire très brièvement qu'est-ce qu'on peut entendre par maturité spirituelle et le lien, la relation entre maturité spirituelle et leadership transformationnel dans l'Église. Je vais commencer par vous, Père Alex. En quelques mots, vous présenter et nous dire votre compréhension de la maturité spirituelle aujourd'hui. Merci, mon Père. Microphone. No, no say you think.
Right. Thank you. My name is Father Alex. I'm the third born in a family of 7. Are we okay now? All right. So again, I'm called Father Alex Ojachor, not Odozor. I'm number 3 in a family of 7. Our dad is 86-year-old, very active catechist. And I'm proud to be here with my younger sister, Sister Kevin. Hi, Mia Sorella. That's my younger sister. Originally from Uganda, but I serve in Chicago, Archdiocese, in the eastern suburbs of the diocese, as associate pastor. Associate pastor is a glorified way of saying a curate. That's me. Would you like me to continue about spiritual leadership? Everybody introduces themselves.
Oui. Je vais demander alors au professeur Madjawa, à qui je vais donner le micro pour qu'il puisse se présenter aussi.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So Your Eminence, Cardinal Ambogo, Your Excellency, Bishop Fortunatus, Your Excellency, Bishop Raymond Ahu, who happened to be my student at the Catholic University of Western Africa in those days. So it's an honor for me. Thank you. My name is Father Clement Majawa, originally from Blantyre Catholic Archdiocese in the southern Malawi. At the moment, I'm the chair of the Department of Dogmatic Theology at the Catholic University of Western Africa in Kenya. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Today we have this important theme on spiritual maturity for transformative leadership in the church. It's very, very important for us again to think on seriously. And my presentation is entitled spiritual maturity for effective leadership through holistic formation of interior personality. And it's a kind of a case study of agents of evangelization in our Messiah region. It needs an answer today. Maturity, spirituality, what is it all about? Because when we move, we go in the church, in the society, people are crying for mature leadership. Where is the problem? In Africa, we have that orality which says, you do not postpone sneezing. If you want to sneeze now, you have to do it. You don't say, I will do it in the afternoon. Meaning there is a problem now which needs a serious and mature answer. And I was happy to hear, Cardinal Mbogo this morning during Eucharistic celebration, when he made it clear, spirituality, maturity, even leadership has got to touch the soul. And you'll see that, in our paper here, we are focusing on the issue of the holistic person. Because most of the time when we are talking about formation, leadership, spirituality, it's only informative. People are trained in this. But also there are some areas which are very, very, important. And as we shall see later on, but of course we have got guiding lines towards, that work of research. It has also to touch what we call the 5 faculties, divine human faculties of holistic formation. It has to touch, number 1, the soul, which is the cardinal was talking about. The soul has to grow. The soul has to develop, to mature, so as to lead to that effective, servant, transformative leadership. But also, the mind, the reason, because most of the time we only focus on that. And then number 3, there is the conscience. We have to ask ourselves that pertinent question. Is our conscience, for example, we are in the major seminary or novitiate, is it really formed, the conscience? But also the sense of natural law, or what is referred to as natural law, or talk about common sense, which some people say it may not be so common at all. But we need that also in leadership. And finally, the constitutionality, which is very important. Therefore, we are supposed to make a report on the research, and then here, mine will be, and I think even the others, we are focusing on the research proposal. That is basically on the planning side. But again, later on, after we have done that thorough research, collection of the data, interpretation, then there will be a final report on the thing. Therefore, allow me, my friends, that I give a brief background and rationale of the study. And here, I said, the world today is at a pastoral crossroad because of personal relativism today, lack of mature spirituality, and fractured Christian witnessing by church leaders and agents of evangelization. There is a personal spiritual degeneration, a pastoral negligence due to lack of quality formation and the descent training of future priests and religious, and the ongoing formational ecclesial component. Research studies, even here in Africa and even all over, and even people with different pastoral positionalities in Africa, and I may say region and Africa in general, it's very, very, very clear that there is a critical gap between formative stages of priesthood or religious life or agents of evangelization and mature spiritual leadership in the parishes and even our dioceses. This gap situation creates a threat to the ministry of the entire process of missionary evangelization. And I recall, with pleasure a doctoral dissertation by a researcher in the Faculty of Theology at the Catholic University of South Africa in Nairobi, entitled Priestly Spiritual Intimacy with God, a Leadership Challenge to Formation and Ministerial Priesthood in Kenya. That was done in 2023. It revealed that some church leaders, about 40%, and lay Christians, 65% in Amesea, experience, and this is very important, experience spiritual immaturity, limitedness, and even burnt out because their faith is not profoundly formed and lacks divine intimacy. St. Augustine of Hippo cited that life of intimacy with God as a mark of spiritual maturity is the highest religious value that a person seeks, and so needs holistic formation, discernment, conversion, and even Cardinal Abong this morning mentioned about that conversion. Spiritual maturity in leadership needs ongoing conversion. That's where we need divine intimacy and holiness with one's interior personality. The study employs scriptural hermeneutics, church tradition, cultural integrity, in-depth analysis of the magisterial document Ratio Fundamentalis Institutionis Sacerdotales of 2016. It gives the guidance of what we are supposed to do, and it applies, it cuts across from the bishops up to priests, religious, and even the laity. We have always to revisit this document. We need it for holistic formation of priests, religious, and the training of mature leaders. And therefore, even though our research has got that document analysis and review of this document. The general objective, I will maybe read that, and the particular will come later on, but they are in the document. To assess, that is the goal, effectively, the extent to which a seminary, okay. Thank you very much for that reminder. So also, we have the contribution, and this again, I took what our Pope, His Holiness, Leo the 14th, what also he's mentioning about, recently he released a very beautiful, a very wonderful, talk about leadership, in the church. As a way forward, what we are doing is, even our research, it anticipates that formation towards transformative leadership, towards transformative even ministry, has got to touch the areas of a person. Because when you are talking about spirituality, coming from the spirit, and who gave that spirit to a human being when God is creating a human being. And we read in the book of Genesis, breathing. God breathed into a person. And that breath of God is in 5 dimensions, as I mentioned earlier. In the spiritual soul, number 1. In our reason or mind, number 2. In our conscience, number 3. That sense of common sense, number 4. And again, common sense. That is again, you are talking finally about the constitutionality, common good. So these have got to be trained again to mature. And then again, of course, as we are collecting the various data from the whole of our Messiah region, we have got to look at it against this document, which I've also mentioned, of the church, but also focusing on what the Holy Father, is saying. And then again, we are also encouraging this new approach of looking at even information has got to touch all these areas. But also it is very, very important that we move together in the spirit of synodality. Every stakeholder in the Catholic Church, in the Messiah region, Africa, and even the one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, we need again to contextualize that. But as we are contextualizing it, we need also to discern, because sometimes that's where the problem is, discernment. We are all called to be guided by the same, spirit, the same palaver, if I can call it. We need to move together so that finally when we are coming up with the conclusions, they should be the ones which are able to transform, all of us. And that's why finally, quoting what Cardinal, Ambongo, was saying, our theology, our catechesis should not just be ideological. I think these are very clear to all of us. Not only theoretical, not only in the mind, but it must trickle down to the grassroots, to the heart, so that afterwards we build a strong church, and in particular in Africa, so that we are truly Catholic Christians and also truly African Christians, or even bishops, priests, and the rest. Thank you very much again for listening.
Thank you so much, Father Professor Majawa. Construire l'avenir sur le leadership de service, le leadership transformationnel, c'est former des leaders spirituellement ancrés, des leaders mûrs, les clercs, les religieux, les laïcs, former des communautés de foi. Merci beaucoup au professeur pour le partage sur son programme de recherche sur la maturité spirituelle. Maintenant, je reviens au père Alex qui va poursuivre dans la même lancée pour nous présenter son programme de recherche sur la maturité spirituelle en faisant ressortir le lien entre maturité spirituelle et leadership transformationnel. Merci, mon père, à vous la parole.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you, Sister. It's in following up with what Cardinal was saying today, that our theology, we must descend from our pedestal to the life experience of people, to the praxis. So for me, spiritual maturity, I would like to go back to the basics. Because spirituality, maturity, these are concepts. Now, when we look at maturity, if I go back to the basics, really originally, maturity comes from the Latin word maturare, which means to ripen, to get ready. So it's a concept that depicts something that has reached its ultimate fulfillment. It has reached its full potential. And when you look at spirituality, again from the Latin word spirare, which means to breathe, it's spiritus, it's a breath. And breath is a vital principle. Now for us, as Christians, to breathe, that vital principle is not something that we give to ourselves. Nobody gives it to us. It is God, as St. Paul says, it is in him that we move, that we live, that we have our being. So bringing together those two concepts in order to operationalize them to depict what spiritual maturity is, it means then spiritual maturity is a growth in our relationship with God, a maturing of our relationship with God. What St. Paul says, we have to grow into mature people. That means our relationship, and when we talk about a relationship, it has consequences. I always like to go to the origin. So, relatio in Latin means re, which means again, and latio, which means to connect. Once you are connected with someone or something, there is, as Professor Majawa said, a transformation. There comes to be that which was not there, and that which was there comes not to be. If that's complicated, it's like if I go through a wall, there was no hole in that wall, and now there is a hole. So our relationship with God is transformational. It doesn't leave us the same way. It has consequences. it is practical, what Cardinal is alluding to. So that means if we are to grow in spiritual leadership, it means that our relationship with God must influence and impact the way that we live, that we speak, that we do. So it's actually a spiritually mature leader, a spiritually mature person is the best kind of leader. Because what that does is, our relationship with Christ helps us to model after Christ, who is really the leader par excellence. So we model Christ. So our relationship with God has impact. It affects the way we do our things. We become more like Christ. And whatever style of leadership that you have, whatever kind of leadership that is necessitated in a particular place, there are fundamental principles. If we identify ourselves with Jesus, that are important for a leader. I'll just outline a few of them. There are times when a leader should be in front. Jesus told his disciples, "Follow me." He was in front and they followed him. There are times when a leader should be with the people. In this current series that is going on, The Chosen, in the movie The Chosen, Jesus is depicted as walking together, synodality, walking together with them. There are times when a leader needs to do that. There are times when a leader should be behind. He should be behind. Remember when Jesus sent his disciples, he sent them ahead of him to the villages that he would visit. There are times when there's a time that he sent them in a boat ahead of him. So there are times when you as a leader, you have to be behind in order to encourage. There are times that you have to be above, to give commands, to give direction. Jesus did that. There are times when you have to be under to provide the structural framework within which the community operates. And Jesus provided that. There are times as a leader when you have not to be there. I was once at the school, school kids were presenting a song. These were young kids. And I couldn't figure out how are they able to coordinate this. But the teacher was right in the middle and was organizing and conducting what the kids were doing. There are times when, as a leader, you have to disappear. Jesus said, unless I disappear from you, you will not get the help that you need. You need the Holy Spirit. So, in summary, this is the work that we are doing. This is what PACTPAN is doing. If we really have to highlight and give voice, I think it was Evarist who talked about this, we have to give voice to the treasures that are existing in Africa in all her dimensions. If we are to make a diagnosis, a prognosis of the challenges that are facing Africa, and if we are to address the unique needs of this continent and improve the lives of Africans, we have to look at leadership. And that is what we are doing as PACTPAN, to try to see how we can identify how leadership is evident in Africa, how it is being carried out in Africa, and how we can train and develop leaders in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup, mon père, mon fils. Merci pour ce que vous venez de partager, qui est très inspirant. Le leader n'est pas celui qui est toujours devant. Il y a des moments où il doit être derrière. Il y a des moments au milieu de la foule, en bas. Merci. Le leader par excellence, vous l'avez dit, c'est le Christ. Notre maturité spirituelle, c'est quand nous sommes pleinement enracinés dans le Christ, quand nous nous identifions à lui, qui est le vrai leader, qui est venu non pour se faire servir, mais pour servir. Merci beaucoup. Je vais maintenant donner la parole à son Excellence, Monseigneur Fortunatus, pour nous parler d'un thème de Church of the Chiefs. Excusez mon anglais. Merci bien, Excellence, à vous la parole.
Maybe the expression, the Church of the Sheaves, may be strange. In French, we are speaking of l'Église des gerbes. L'Église des gerbes. Oui. Je l'appelle la formulation du code 1266. 1266. Le code, c'est un texte biblique. Le texte de Psaume 126, verset 6. Je retourne à la langue anglaise. Permit me to begin by saying thank you to the organizers of this meeting and for inviting me to be part of it. I thank in a special way Professor Stan Ilo for wanting to make me part of this meeting. And with you, I thank all the organizers. I wish also to thank all our brothers and sisters that have been involved in promoting missionary cooperation between the churches of the South and those of the West. I wish in this regard to recognize the work already begun by Dr. Jean-Paul Niyejena and those who have been working with him in this regard. The commissions of the conferences, Episcopal Conferences of Africa and the Episcopal Conferences of Europe. When I was, maybe that gives a bit of my biographical presentation, I was named Secretary of the Dicastery for Evangelization in the Vatican. For those who do not know, my name is Fortunatus Nwachukwu, and I am Nigerian. No one is perfect, you know. So I was bundled back to the Vatican after some beautiful years as apostolic nuncio. I was already in the Vatican taking care of protocol under Pope Benedict XVI as chief of protocol. Then I was made nuncio in Nicaragua. I had 5 beautiful years in Nicaragua, then sent as nuncio to the Caribbean in Trinidad and Tobago and 22 other small nations in the region. Then I was transferred and made nuncio, permanent observer of the Holy See to the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland. I was still unpacking my baggages when Pope Francis called me back to the Vatican as Secretary of the Dicastery for Evangelization. It was in that context that I came to know of the work that was being done by Dr. Jean-Paul and by Professor Ilo and his colleagues of DePaul University and others also in the area of missionary cooperation between the churches of the South and those of the North. And then I began to ask myself, how do we present ourselves in this context? And I wish to thank you in a special way for this meeting, which comes immediately after another important meeting in Kigali of the Symposium of the Episcopal Conferences of Africa. It is a great honor to have among us here the president of that body, His Eminence Cardinal Fridolin Ambongo, who is here with us. And then also we are welcomed by our brother, the local ordinary bishop, also one of the local ordinaries, Bishop of Grand Bassam. How do we present ourselves in these contexts of cooperation, missionary cooperation? We speak big grammar, we talk, and what we get out of it. I am happy that this conference is dealing with the question of leadership. And I wish to thank those that have intervened on this topic. I know I am not supposed to be taking too much time. I will be brief. I promise you. Initially, when Professor Ilo invited me, he told me to talk to the theme of the Church of the Sheaves, Africa's mission to itself and to the world in a synodal church. I am going to leave him the text of my intervention, which is 13 pages. And yesterday he told me I shouldn't speak more than 25 minutes. So there was no way I could forward my text to the interpreters. I'm sorry for them. I know it is one of the most difficult things to do, simultaneous interpretation. So you don't have my text to help you. I will try to be slow. First, how does this concern leadership? We are speaking of leadership. And my brother here who spoke put the spiritual leadership in the context of following Christ and context of what St. Paul said. And the Church of the Sheaves has also something to do with leadership. Brief comment on leadership that is not contained in my speech. What does the Bible tell us about spiritual leadership? What does Jesus tell us? Well, I take you to a very important text, which is the word of Jesus, the words of Jesus to Simon Peter, that we find in the Gospel according to John, chapter 21, verses 15 to 19. L'Évangile selon Saint Jean, chapitre 21, les versets 15 jusqu'à 19. Je l'ai dit en français parce il faudra retenir ces versets. In verses 15, 16, 17, Jesus got Peter to renew his faith by the triple confession of love. After each confession, he invited him to become the pastor the shepherd. Bear in mind that until this moment, Jesus had given nobody that vocation, that duty of becoming shepherd. Jesus did not call his disciples to become shepherds. He called them to become fishers. Go back and check the texts. Mark chapter 1 verse 17. Follow me and I will make you fishers of men. Matthew chapter 4 verse 19. Come and I will make you a fisher of men. He didn't call them to become shepherds or pastors. Today, everybody wants to be pastor. Only one person. He did not call anybody to become pastor because he said that was a prerogative he kept for himself. John chapter 10, verse 11. I am the good shepherd. He is the pastor. He didn't want to give it to anybody. It was only when he was about to return to heaven that he gave it to Peter. And others are effective pastors. The other apostles became pastors also in collaboration with Peter in that mandate. And today people are also pastors by collaborating with the successors of the apostles and the successor of Peter. And so Peter is the model of leadership we have in the Christian New Testament. And after his triple confession of love, in verse 18 of that chapter 21 of John, Jesus said to him, now we are speaking of spiritual maturity. This is spiritual maturity. He said, when you were young, you used to decide where you want to go. You put your belt, you put your clothes, and go where you wish. When you are old, is he talking of physical old age? Of course, he's speaking of spiritual maturity. He said, you are going to extend your hands, and somebody will put a belt around your waist and lead you even where you would not want to go. So in maturity, you have to ask yourself, what is the belt around my waist that leads me not where I want to go, but even where I don't want to go? That belt around the waist of Peter was the word of God. And it was only after Jesus had given that principle of the belt around the waist of Peter that he said to him in verse 19, follow me. Now, we have what biblical exegetes call inclusion. From the initial follow me, I will make you a fisher, to the final follow me in John chapter 21 verse 19. He didn't tell him what he was going to make him. He just said, follow me. That is spiritual leadership. Knowing how to follow Jesus. Now, this text contrasts with the text we had this morning in the gospel, the confession of Peter at Caesarea Philippi, in Matthew chapter 16, verses 13 to 24. We are speaking precisely about verse 22 and verse 23. After the confession of Peter, when Jesus told him he was going to be the rock on which the church will be built, Peter started feeling a bit chimbombo, you know, as we say in Nigeria. He started feeling boga, a bit big. he felt he would then direct Jesus. Jesus started telling him the plan of his mission. He went to Jesus and said, "No, Master, this is not going to happen to you." Leadership does not mean telling Jesus where he is supposed to go. Jesus intervened in verse 23 and said to him, "Hypage, hypage, take yourself away, opizomu, from my presence. Satana, get behind me, get away from my presence, get behind me, Satana." Why? Our place is not to lead Jesus, but to follow him. Because if we try to lead Jesus, we shall lead him, we shall cause distraction. That is what Satana is, obstruction, distraction. So this is why we need to know how to follow Jesus in spiritual leadership. But I want to tell you just a second reflection regarding leadership. And this is how St. Paul interprets it. We find it in the Code 132. Le Code 132 est très important aussi pour nous. Parce que là-bas, l'apôtre Saint Paul nous dit ce qui est nécessaire pour être vraiment grandi. Dans ce texte, Saint Paul dit que il avait donné aux chrétiens de Corinthe du lait parce qu'ils étaient des enfants, des petits enfants. L'enfant grandit ne dépend plus du lait, mais d'une nourriture solide et de la chair à manger. Le problème qu'on a en Afrique, et souvent dans les jeunes églises, est le problème de ce qu'on appelle le syndrome du bébé, the baby syndrome. We find the base on the words of St. Paul to the church in Corinth, 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 2. St. Paul telling the Christians there, I fed you with milk because you were babies. But then grown-ups are not fed with milk. They're fed with solid food and with meat. And so one of the problems we have in the young churches is a problem of the baby syndrome. I call it also the syndrome of the crib syndrome. We have our discussions, conferences, and so on. At the end, we ask ourselves, what is its place? What is the place of all these words in the discussions of the universal church? Now, I'm going to give you a sad example. After the first Special Assembly for Africa of the Synod of Bishops, which we call the First African Synod, the paradigm of church as family became popularized. And African theologians, in the final exhortation, Pope St. John Paul II invited theologians in Africa to develop this paradigm of the church, which shows the true identity of the church. Everybody in Africa had been talking about the church as family. Nobody doubts that. Even serious research based on the Bible, the history of the church, supports the fact that the church is the family of God. Karl Rahner supports it. Cardinal Ratzinger, before he became Pope Benedict XVI, supported it. Pope Francis said that the church is the family of families. And recently, on the 22nd of May, last 22nd of May, Pope Leo XIV, addressing representatives, national directors of Pontifical Mission Society, said that the church is the family of God. But let me ask you, how many of the local churches in the West have recognized and adopted this paradigm? I give you an example. In 2015, the eminent professor and cardinal whom I have great respect for, Cardinal Walter Kasper, wrote a book, The Katholische Kirche, the Catholic Church, which has remained, at least in the field of the German language, one of the biggest and most important monographs on the Catholic Church. In the past decades, we have had the Kirche of Hans Küng, and then we have also the Kirche of Medard Keil, which came out in 1991, 1992. And then we now have the Katholische Kirche of Walter Kasper. I read through that heavy book. He mentioned various models of the church. I did not find anywhere in the book any reference to the church as family. Why? Why are we not being taken serious? Of course, there are many people in the West, and I see our brothers here who are professors, who are listening to Africa and taking us serious. What is happening? Is it not the way we present ourselves? Now you see the source and why I started speaking of the Church of the Sheaves and the code 1266, which represents Psalm 126, verse 6. I thank Professor Ilo for taking the cue from me and developing a big write-up on this. And now we are thinking of maybe making this something more international and official to also cooperate, link up with the efforts being done by Professor Jean-Paul and the others, and try to give a global presentation, not only of the church in Africa, but also the churches in the global south. How do we present ourselves? This is where we find it in the Psalm of Ascent, one of the Psalms of Ascent. You know these Psalms, Psalms 121 to 130. This one, Psalm 126, is a psalm that talks about the return of the exiles of Zion. The Hebrew expression, Beshuv Adonai et Shivat Sion, when the Lord brought back the former prisoners of Zion, said, we seemed to be dreaming. It was like a dream. Then in verse 6, it says, they go out, full of tears, carrying seed for the sowing. They come back, full of songs, carrying their sheaves.
En allant, ils allaient pleurant, portant les semences pour s'aimer. En retournant, ils retournaient chantant, portant les gerbes. C'est là qu'on a trouvé l'image de l'église des gerbes. On returning, they came back full of songs carrying their sheaves. We, the young churches, are the church or the churches of the sheaves. So who were those who went out full of tears, carrying seed for the sowing? Think of the great missionaries. I tell my friends from Europe that they were the greatest gift from the West to the world. Those heroes of our faith, the missionaries, they left when we did not have the modern means of transportation, when we did not have modern medicine. So their going was like a dying, because they did not think of coming back home. And their families did not think of seeing them again. Last year, I went to Guinea, I went to Conakry, and I visited the sanctuary of Bofa. I went to the cemetery of the missionaries. You could see how young they died. 34 years, 35 years. Hardly any of them came to 40. And yet, as they died, others were coming. Think of it. They left their comfort zones. They left their families at the most beautiful moment of their youth. Of course, you can imagine the amount of tears that flowed as they left. And that is why we say they went out full of tears. And they went carrying seed for sowing, the seed of the gospel. And they came and they sowed the seeds of the gospel. And today, the seed has grown and has borne fruit. And we are in the moment of harvest, in the moment of the sheaves. Let me tell you, Christians in Africa, Christians in the young churches are the sheaves of the sacrifice, of the tears, of the missionaries of the West. So our church, our life, is a testimony of these people that came. And when we return to Europe, we are not going to evangelize Europe. Europe is already evangelized. So let's change that language. We need a mentality transformation. We're not going to change, we're not going to evangelize Europe. We are going to integrate, to become part of the wider family that gave birth to us. They told me I have 1 minute to go, and I'm going to tell you. So, in this integration, we also need that Europe, we recognize that a mother that gave birth to a child is not afraid of the child coming back home, even if this child has become very famous. So even in Europe, we need a change of mentality to welcome their children. On our own sides, we also need to behave like mature people, no longer like babies in the crib. Because as long as we are like babies in the crib, waiting for the milk from the West, we are not going to be taken seriously. What does it mean to be like babies in the crib? if anything we do, we're still waiting all the time for subsidies from the West. We're still like babies in the crib. Oh, but we don't have the means. Yes, we do have the means. I can tell you this. I have served in poorer countries than African countries. And they are able to share in their poverty. We cannot call ourselves adult churches until we are able to support, according to our possibility, the missionaries, male and women, that we send out to other churches. So, Your Eminence, this is a challenge also to the conferences of bishops in Africa. How many Episcopal conferences have got missionary endowment funds? How many dioceses and archdioceses in Africa have got mission endowment funds? If you cannot give a pocket money, at least annually, to your missionaries that are in other places in the world, your missionaries are going to be seen as still beggars or as parasites coming to look for money in those churches. Can we do it? Of course, we have many dioceses in Africa that can do it. Some are doing it. I know two at least. I know the Archdiocese of Lagos, which has its Caritas, that is supporting its missionaries in other places. I know the Archdiocese of Onitsha, which has got initiatives. I know that this Archdiocese of Abidjan is having its initiatives. I have spoken about this with His Eminence Cardinal Ambongo. And I know that the Archdiocese of Kinshasa is trying to do something also. Let us throw away the argument that we do not have. Even if the little you have, set apart a little of it to support your missionaries that are elsewhere in the Caribbean, in Africa, or in other places. Otherwise, we shall continue to be perpetual beggars and parasites instead of being people coming to cooperate in the synodal church. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Excellence, pour ce très beau partage, très riche. Nous avons été enrichis de beaucoup de versets et ce que nous retenons après tout ceci, c'est que dans cette maturité spirituelle, nous devons comprendre que c'est Jésus qui est le seul bon berger et que le rôle, notre mission, c'est de devenir des pêcheurs d'hommes. Et pour ce leadership spirituel, savoir comment trouver Jésus et devenir la pierre sur laquelle il peut bâtir. Merci beaucoup, Excellence.
Merci bien. Et nous allons conclure cette première partie de notre première session sur le leadership, la maturité spirituelle, le leadership de service, leadership transformationnel. Je vais donner juste 3-4 minutes au Père Alex pour conclure avec le projet de formation des leaders matures qui n'avaient pas pu présenter. 4 minutes, Father, please. 4, 5. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're commissioned by PACTPAN to form a team of experts in research to be able to implement a project that is supported by the Templeton Foundation. Templeton Foundation is a foundation that helps to fund the area of intersection between religion and science. And in particular, we have the Templeton Research Trust Fund that partnered with PACTPAN to help us to investigate the nature of spiritual maturity in Africa, to help us look at its development and its impact on African Christians. So we formed a team of, we call them experts, to help to guide this research. And we have the ethics research board. We call it the ethics review team. The ethics review team is composed of Father Paschal. Father Paschal, can you raise your hand? Father Paschal. We have Sister Wamuyu Wachira. Sister Wamuyu Wachira. Sister Dominic DiPio, who is not with us here, and Sister Leonida, and myself as the coordinating servant. So our role is really to help researchers shape their research strategies. You heard from Professor Majawa, by the way, was also who supervised my work in Catholic University. So I get to pay back time to supervise his work as well. So we help the researchers to shape their research strategies. We would like to ensure that the research meets some standard scientific validity that's necessary to carry any research. And we also try to conduct potential benefit and risk analysis of the research, because this research concerns human persons, and sometimes there are ramifications in this. So we need to monitor compliance with our PACTPAN protocols, which we have already instituted, and they are operational. So anybody who's doing research in the auspices of PACTPAN will have to go through the research review board, and there is a list that we have gotten, and we need all those checked that you have fulfilled those requirements of PACTPAN, but also that you meet the requirements of the protocols in the region where you are doing your research. Because again, the thing is not to put obstacles, as Bishop was saying about Peter. It's not in order to put obstacles, but it's in order for us to give you an institutional cover on behalf of PACTPAN when you are doing your research. So that's the team that is there. We are at work. Right now, there are researchers in 11 different African countries that are working on this theme of spiritual leadership and its impact on African Christians. There are some who are way ahead. I think 3 are almost at the finish point. There are some who are still going on, but unfortunately, there are still many who are behind. We are miserably behind in this research project. So if you're a researcher among those 11 countries that are carrying out this research, we need to partner, come talk to us. We need to work together so that we can complete this research. Again, as Bishop was saying, we need to be mature Christians. So if we're partnering and we're behind schedule, it doesn't bode well with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Père Alex. Merci vraiment aux 3 intervenants à qui nous allons faire un applauso. Merci pour votre contribution. Merci. Nous continuons notre matinée dans la réflexion. Un autre aspect du leadership, de la construction de l'avenir de notre Église, c'est former des communautés autonomes. Maintenant, je vais donner la parole au Père Théogéné qui va nous partager autour du thème de l'autonomie de nos églises, la mission de l'Église d'Afrique vers le monde. Merci mon Père, à vous la parole.
Merci beaucoup. Je m'appelle Théogène Havgimana. Je suis prêtre en mission dans le diocèse de Malines et Bruxelles en Belgique. Académiquement, je donne cours, je suis plutôt dans le domaine de la philosophie, spécialisé en métaphysique, où je donne cours d'abord au séminaire, au grand séminaire au Rwanda, Je suis originaire du Rwanda, mais aussi attaché au département de recherche en métaphysique à la faculté de philosophie à la KU Leuven. Actuellement, je fais aussi des recherches dans le département de la philosophie politique au sein du groupe qu'on appelle RIPO Group de notre faculté. À part ça, je suis directeur national de Missio Belgique, ce qui me fait aujourd'hui aussi intervenir en qualité de mon expérience et de mes contacts, et surtout avec les pays d'Afrique. Je vais donner mon intervention en anglais. Je l'ai préparée en anglais, mais si l'un ou l'autre a une question en français, il peut le poser en français ou en anglais. Donc c'est possible. Je vais parler d'un thème que je trouve, au fait, quand l'archevêque Fortunatus a fini de parler, je me suis demandé si je dois parler, parce que ça rentre dans le même thème, dans la même perspective. Self-reliance and Missio Dei from Africa to the world. You know, Christianity in Africa was introduced by missionaries, and most of them were from Europe, from the West. And that has led to a kind of dependence on Western financial and human resources. This has been going on for several decennia. A key challenge now is how to foster financial sustainability and to encourage local churches to fund their own missions, to fund their own projects. You know, many dioceses in Africa still rely heavily on financial support from overseas. That is a fact. And this leads to a cycle of dependency, and as a consequence to a lack of ownership, stunted growth, and a distorted sense of accountability. The last 4 years in the office of Missio Belgium, I have been exploring the situation in several African countries, and I came to the conclusion that the move to self-reliance, to autonomy and financial autonomy is, for the church in Africa, no longer a choice to make. It's no longer a choice to make, it's a must. And the narrative of African churches' dependency on external help is deeply changing. For that, I'm very happy for that. The emphasis on the African church's agency and self-determination is rapidly growing. Despite challenges the continent of Africa is facing, many dioceses are actively moving towards greater financial sustainability through encouraging self-financing projects, fostering financial literacy and management skills. I was happy to see the young people yesterday. That was, for me, actually the key event, the key session of this meeting, to see how young people are thinking and looking and heading to the future with little means they have, thanks to PACTPAN. So there is a kind of growing development of Africans' theological frameworks, and the investment in leadership, training, and mentorship programs show that the church in Africa is waking up from its historic, and for those who knows the famous saying of Kant after reading Hume, Africa is waking up from its dogmatic slumbers. In my view, a re-evaluation of the theology of mission, an emphasis on the local ownership and empowerment are essential to the African Church's development of its own strategies for growth and impact. In this perspective, external cooperation and financial support can be strictly geared towards achieving long-term self-reliance for the local churches in Africa. Much is expected from church leadership. Its synodal dealing with the continent's challenges, particularly in areas like social justice and education, will unquestionably lead the church in Africa to develop its own unique expressions of faith, to increase its financial and human resources, self-reliance, and so on. And especially to strongly reaffirm its contribution to the church's global mission. That is what Archbishop Fortunatus said. In my reflection, I had written almost 15 pages, which I will try to put in 10 minutes. I depart from 8 minutes, good. So I depart from the demographic facts of the African continent, and then its place in the actual context of the universal church. And then the second and the third steps of my talk deal with self-reliance as a mindset, and then the strategies to adopt in order to achieve it. And my final point is dedicated to the Missio Dei, the mission from Africa to the universal church. So with regard to the demographic growth of the church in Africa, I see it as a challenge and as an opportunity. Scholars highlight the significant growth of evolving identity of the African church, noting its demographic expansion, cultural adaptation, its increasing influence in global Catholicism. Now, while the majority of Christianity in the global north is shrinking, the global south, Africa, Asia, Latin America, is showing a kind of dynamism and enthusiasm. Scholars link the growth of Catholicism in Africa to the concept of Africanization, or more broadly, sometimes inculturation. That means the process of integrating African cultures and practices into Catholicism, or adapting Catholic teachings and practices to the local context. I have some scholars who have already done a great work in that area. For instance, Professor Magesa, who emphasized the role played by the Second Vatican Council and the subsequent African synods in fostering a more self-confident and influential African Catholic Church. Some scholars date the beginning of this growth early before the Vatican Council, the Second Vatican Council. For instance, Dana Roberts saw the transformation of world Christianity since the Second World War as a massive cultural and geographic shift away from Europeans and their descendants towards peoples of the Southern Hemisphere in the South. So the shift to the South began early in the century. And some people say, some scholars date that in the 40s. And there you see the rising movements of Christianity in Africa, for instance, together with some kind of political and ecclesiastical self-determination. There is a change in that period. There is a kind of move towards autonomy and independence as well. So statistics show that in the 90s, 80% of the old Christians were Europeans and North Americans. Africa counted only 9 million Christians of all denominations, and almost all of them were in Egypt and Ethiopia. But 40 years later, in 1945, due to the missionary movement in Africa, the number of Christians had already doubled and reached 30 million. In the 70s, there were 70 million Christians in Africa. And now, 50 years later, there are over 600 million Christians in Africa, all denominations counted. And then a notable growth of the Catholic population worldwide during the year 22 and 23 is confirmed by a detailed analysis of the life of the Catholic Church globally to be found in the 2025 Annuario Pontificio of Annuarium Statisticum Ecclesiae, published by the Vatican Center for Church Statistics. What does it mean? There has been a 1.15% increase in the global Catholic population. And the great growth is seen in Africa, increasing from 272 million in 2020 to 281 million in 23. So this growth is particularly dynamic, with countries such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, which leads the region with nearly 55 million Catholics, and other countries like Nigeria, Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya. So the statistics show us that African Christianity, Christians in Africa are growing. And then I was last week in the second plenary assembly, and there we had a reminder by Charles G. Palmerberg, the Metropolitan Archbishop of Cape Coast in Ghana, who summarized the current situation as follows. Now, the population of the continent of Africa is 1.5 billion, and the Catholic Church is about 281 million, constituting 21 of the global church. There are about 540 dioceses with 785 bishops and about 50,000 priests and more than 80,000 religious women and men. Africa is the fastest growing continental church in the world. So what does it mean for us now? This continent also has over 65% of its population below the age of 35, making it a huge potential of vitality, creativity, and zeal with its attending challenges. And definitely, and here comes geopolitics, because of Africa's enormous potential in human and natural resources, this is why it is unfortunately the theater of geopolitical and economic interest, as well as the theater of proxy wars and conflicts, which must be reckoned with taking into consideration the forward march on the church evangelization mission in Africa. So, now, what does it mean for self-reliance? We have already human resources. We have a potential how to actualize it. For those who know Aristotle, from potentia to the actualization of what we have, what should we do? Archbishop Fortunatus talked about the problematic of young churches. Is the African church going to remain young, or is it going to grow and to mature. What does it mean for us in Africa to be autonomous? I remember when I was reading an interview with Cardinal Protase Rugambwa, the current Metropolitan Archbishop Tabora and former Secretary of the Dicastery for Evangelization. He says that there is no doubt that the numbers are increasing, but at the same time, the Catholic Church in Africa faces big challenges to which nobody has ready-made or magic answers. Yes, but there is a possibility of looking beyond and say, for instance, what I'm proposing now is that self-reliance starts from within. It's a mindset. Self-reliance is about changing one's mentality and taking one's ownership, one's own life, trusting one's own judgment, and developing the capacity to meet. I have 3 minutes, it's good. Self-reliance is about changing one's mentality, taking ownership of one's life, trusting one's own judgment, and developing the capacity to meet challenges independently. Is the church in Africa ready to do that? Is the church in Africa ready to cultivate self-reliance mindset, to empower the young people to see beyond this time and to invest in the future? Is the church in Africa capable of collecting means and as a family support those who are in need? We do that on Mission Sunday, but we have to do more. Being financially self-reliant involves supporting oneself through one's own work and investments. And this frees one from financial insecurity, gives us flexibility to make financial decisions aligned with our values and priorities. There are a lot of organizations, charities trying to help in that area, trying to propose aid to Africa. But what are their motivations? I think the church in Africa needs to check every charity coming with money or other aid. What are the motivations? Are they Christian, Catholic inspired or not? Some of them are imposing some rules, some conditions which go against the African values. It's up to African church to check all those organizations to see what are their purposes, what are their conditions, what are their restrictions. Because if we don't do that, then the African church will lose its identity. Growing in autonomy means being able to analyze, to see, and to choose. I remember during our meeting of SECAM, Cardinal Fridolin Ambongo, who is here, said, if we are not very careful, we will become the éternel mendiant. And that is what the church in Africa doesn't want. They have to be self-reliant. They have to be autonomous. In that case, I conclude that self-reliance is a mission for every diocese, a mission for every parish, a mission for every one of us. And aid, external help, external aid, subsidies given to the seminaries, given to the dioceses, archdioceses, those are temporary support. They cannot be permanent. They cannot be permanent. That means, actually, that is what Archbishop Fortunatus was saying. time of milk has almost gone. There is time to find out if there is a solid food. And the solid food has to come from within. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup, mon père. C'est un thème très intéressant, très riche. Je pense que durant les échanges, la Palaver, nous aurons à revenir encore sur ces aspects de notre maturité, de la maturité de l'Église, famille de Dieu en Afrique. Sortir de l'état d'éternel mendiant, d'assister à ceux qui assistent, d'église bénéficiaire à une église qui est bienfaitrice, une église mûre. Merci beaucoup pour votre partage. Le dernier intervenant de notre matinée va nous parler autour des défis environnementaux de l'Afrique et les opportunités d'espoir et d'innovation. Le rôle de leader englobe aussi un engagement pour la protection, en faveur de la protection de notre maison commune. Nous allons donner la parole au Père Peter Chikere pour son intervention. Mon Père, vous avez 8 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you. My name is Peter Chikere. I am a priest of the Missionary Society of St. Paul of Nigeria, appointed spiritual director and lecturer at the National Missionary Seminary of St. Paul, Abuja. Currently completing my studies in spirituality and religious formation at Tangaza University, Nairobi. I must say I feel very privileged to be making this presentation before such a distinguished audience. But I am also poised to share with you the fruit of my studies and reflection on how to transform Africa's environmental crisis into opportunities for hope and innovation. My main focus is to explore the influence of strategic alliances. I read the book of Maathai Wangari of Kenya, that great professor who led the Green Belt movement, achieved so much. There is something she says that is quite striking. She says that in her book, The Challenges for Africa, she observed that environmental issues lie at the heart of both Africa's developmental challenges and the continent's possible avenues towards sustainable solution. I want to omit the introductory part, which focuses on the background of this study is the environment. I belong to the Laudato Si unit. But this study was particularly inspired by this growing call for Africa to attain self-reliance, especially economically. So many scholars have lamented the detrimental nature of foreign aid to Africa's development. Michael Warren's book, The Road to Hell, critiques foreign aid for creating dependency and prolonging underdevelopment. This book was based on his experience in working in Somalia and Haiti. And he shows how aid often benefits the donors more than the recipients. For instance, food aid became a tool of manipulation in Somalia, enriching warlords and creating black markets. So in Africa, environmental aid has sometimes reflected these failures. Projects are sometimes imposed from outside, often ignore local contexts and collapse once the funding ends. This does not suggest total self-sufficiency. Africa is still vulnerable to global environmental threats, even though, as studies show, Africa contributes the least to global emission. So the challenge is to restructure our understanding of aid and funding. And I believe what we should be talking about is strategic alliance, which, if I connect it with all the presentations already made here, is the sign of maturity based on mutual respect and shared responsibility. Weber and his group also, in the book Promoting Economic Development Through the Strategy of Self-Reliance, they support what Marin had already propounded. They argue for African-designed development strategies that is rooted in local realities. So, self-reliance, I've been asking, what does it mean? It shouldn't mean isolation. It rather should mean intentional engagement that enhances African agency, where the African has an identity, an autonomy. So these arguments complement what Marin had already said by suggesting a model where development flows through Africa, not flows into Africa, which is what we have currently. So, even in her book, in her memoir, Mathai Wangari, the memoir is titled Unbowed. She hinted on the challenges of foreign aid. Although she does not blame the donors like others have done, she raises another different concern, which is about African leaders not utilizing some of the aids that come into Africa for the right intentions. And this resonates with also the position of Marin and some others. For instance, in my own country, Nigeria, we witnessed, is in the public domain, how political leaders hoarded the palliatives that were provided during the COVID-19, and we are distributing them at their birthdays or birthdays of their wives or their daughters. So when we talk about self-reliance, we need to look at how we are autonomous, but realizing the fact that we always will need collaborators. And that is why I found the work of Mathai very key and strategic. Through the Greenbelt movement, more than 50 million trees were planted. Women were empowered. That movement became an opportunity for even political, advocacy. So I was asking, how did that movement achieve so much? And I found that the answer is strategic alliances. She collaborated with a lot of foreign donors, but her mission was still achieved. So I'm arguing that the problem may not be about funding, but maybe we realizing ourselves becoming mature, so to say. So these theories highlight the ineffectiveness of isolating ourselves in the name of self-reliance. The effort should be based on what we already have in Catholic theology. For instance, Pope Francis called the word to conversion, which will lead to just and responsible care for creation. Okay? So, saying we learn how to relate with fellow individuals, how to relate with God, and how to relate with the natural world. So, strategic alliance will be a cooperative partnership deliberately entered into by people here now, African, with others, to attain the mutual objective. So the doctrine of human dignity is enshrined in all of these. Aquinas will tell us that the human person is incommunicable. So what autonomy means to an individual is what sovereignty means to a nation. So it is strategic alliance that positions us as autonomous, and then we are able to enter into alliance with others because even the donor has an intention for their funds, and that should be respected. So even when I did the program on funding and crowdfunding, they emphasize you write your project according to, you write your project what you want to achieve, but it also meets the expectation of the donors. It must represent the values they share so that they can sponsor something that represents their own values. So this is what this paper is arguing, that what Africa needs is to enter into strategic alliance, not isolation. So when we talk about self-reliance, that is what it should be. Strategic alliance is based on system theories. Okay, system theories and interdependence theory. System theory offers us the framework that makes us to understand realities as complex. For instance, still using ecological problems is so complex that everybody contributes to it. Sometimes we have argued that Africa contributes little, but in reality, studies have shown that, simple things as cooking or bush burning in most African countries contribute a lot to the atmosphere. You see, so we have to, from that little contribution we are making, we take responsibility, and then, so when we collaborate, we know that all of us are part of the problem, and all of us have to be part of the solution. So, interdependence theory, which was articulated by Robert O. Keohane and Joseph, explores how actors, the individuals, it could be groups or nations, are mutually reliant on the resources, the giftedness of each group. You see, that is what system theory and interdependence theory posits, that we leverage on the giftedness, on what the other has. It could be the political dimension, it could be the money dimension, it could be the advocacy. And this is why what PACTPAN is doing is so great, gathering people from different walks of life, from different, both theologians and pastoral workers, practitioners, policymakers, uniting all to become part of the solution. Without collaboration, I believe no effort would be sustainable. There no effort. Let me say, Africa, I don't see any day Africa will become so independent that we don't need funding. Even European nations, they still look for funds. They do fundraise. Some programs you join, they ask for subscription. They raise funds from time to time. There's a group I belong to, the church, the Future Church. From time to time, they ask for donations. So, when we talk about self-reliance, let it be positioning ourselves as autonomous, with vision, and that is where the problem is always leadership. Thank you. So I would like to hint on some of the achievements of the Green Belt movement, and just to highlight, for instance, this movement, they partnered with UNEP, USAID, many NGOs. They got technical support, and they had global visibility. I'm using that as an example because it was successful, and the impact went beyond Africa. So that's saying that it has been done. Someone has done it. Someone has succeeded. And PACTPAN, I believe, is succeeding also based on strategic alliance. If I were to sponsor myself, I doubt if I would have come. But I had my good intentions, but thanks to those who funded our flight. So the position here is that we need to position ourselves, attain this maturity that has been mentioned several times, and we can now, on equal ground, enter into alliance with others, respect their own interests, they respect our own interests, and we can achieve developments together. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci. Merci vraiment. Merci beaucoup. Encore merci à tous nos intervenants de ce matin. Nous avons un peu débordé, mais nous allons quand même nous donner le temps d'échange. Et notre organisation du congrès veut qu'on écoute des intervenants et après nous ouvrons la palabre où nous sommes tous invités à apporter notre contribution dans les échanges et pour qu'au sortir d'ici, nous ayons de meilleures stratégies pour notre rôle dans l'Église et dans la société. Nous pouvons poser des questions, mais ce que nous attendons plus de l'Assemblée, c'est des contributions à ce qui a été dit, des apports pour enrichir, des questions peut-être, mais des contributions plus. Donc nous allons nous promener avec 2 micros et nous vous demandons, s'il vous plaît, d'être très bref dans votre intervention, 1 minute et demie. 1 minute et demie par intervenant. Comme ça, nous pourrons écouter plusieurs personnes. Celui ou celle qui veut parler lève simplement sa main et nous lui donnons le micro. Merci.
Thank you. I want to sincerely appreciate and thank all the presenters. To thank Monsignor Fortunatus Nwachuku and all the presenters. My contribution towards self-reliance should actually begin from the church, from the bishops, the priests, and the religious. If we look at the way we go into functioning in the parishes, when ordination is taking place, during our formation, you go back and look at some of your classmates in the secondary school or those who have gone to the universities and they are working. When they live their lives according to their earnings. But when we come to the issue of our priests, some of our bishops, we have 2 cars, 3 cars. A car will cost you almost like in Nigeria, 15 million. Like one of the young priests, I was in formation that bought a car. After 3 years of formation, in 2027, they gave him a car. He abandoned the car and he went for a very big car. And that car, as of that time, was costing about 8 million. And the bishop said to him, how are you going to carry that car now to go to an outstation where they are going to make offertory of 2 naira, 500 naira? So I see that through PACTPAN, we should once again rejig the model of formation, that the priesthood is not a triumphant platform or the sisterhood, that we should live within our means. We should go back to the kenotic spirituality of Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 to 11, the self-emptying, self-sacrificing, and self-surrendering, that PACTPAN should promote modest life for priests and religious and our bishops. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Father.
Thank you, Bishop Fortunatus Nwachukwu. I'm so glad to listen to you. My question really goes to the spirituality and maturity, or spiritual maturity team. As I listened to you throughout, I was expecting to hear you mention African traditional religion, because you were talking about African spirituality, not African Christianity. And why I say that is, if you interact with the young generation, either on social media or speak with them now, within the context of the socio-economic, socio-spiritual problems that seem to face Africa, there seems to be a renaissance of this consciousness of the African traditional religion. So my number one question for you is, what exactly is African spirituality? And how can we understand that, which is broader than Christianity? Second is, given this kind of quest and renaissance, how can we reconcile African traditional religion with the challenges that face our faith as Christians and pastoral leaders in Africa? And Bishop, you had talked about us being fishermen, and then that Christ did not ask us to be shepherds and pastors. As an aside, I'm wondering whether the Pope should have the fisherman's ring, since he's the shepherd. And what does that mean? Should we give the Pope the shepherd's ring instead of the fisherman's ring? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Father David Kamaumbugwa, Franciscan Capuchin. My contribution to what is happening here, I'm trying to put together the three concepts that has come up here. The concept of solidarity, the concept of self-reliance, and the concept of family. Looking at the structure of the church today, of course, we are divided into dioceses, parishes, and if you look at all these dioceses and parishes, you find that there are some parishes which are very, very rich, and some parishes which are poor, almost unable to take care of their own priests. And I'm wondering, is it the same church? Is there a possibility of looking the church as a family, whereby the father is able to take care of all the children, within the family, so that those parishes, those dioceses that are capable can also be able to extend to the smaller dioceses, to the smaller parishes. In that way, the concept of equality within the church is seen. This is my wondering. Thank you.
Dumebi Atta is my name, lecturer at Veritas University, Abuja. My question is for Theology. We are talking about self-reliant African church, which is actually an ideal. But given the concrete reality of the economic situation in much of Africa, how do you think we will realize this independence, in quotes, hormonal type of church that doesn't rely on external help, especially if the church is to be prophetic in speaking against political leadership in the country. Because you find out that when the church criticizes the government could, in trying to punish the church, withdraw whichever support they can give. And then the weight of the church's mission, assignments, schools, and other things will fall on the people, and the people will be crying that the church is imposing tax on them. So I see a type of conflict. But that's, by the way, I support a self-reliant African church.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, my contribution is about the parasitic church. I think the bishop used the symbol of a parasite. In many of our parishes, really, we are not trying to be self-reliant. You go to a parish, there's a lot of collections from the small Christian communities. By the end of the year, there's no development taking place at all. And as one of my colleagues has said, you find that some of our priests, I don't know whether it's a greed, where they are sort of developing themselves more than the parish. So the challenge is that most of the young people in the Catholic Church, they are now shying off even from participating in the church. And if you are not careful, if you go to a small Christian community, it is made of old women and very old men. And I challenge our parish priests or churches, let us think about how can we motivate these young people to come to church? Not just annual contribution, which is continuous. Every time you go to the small Christian community, people discuss money more than spirituality. So I encourage the church that let's have the model, for example, of the religious.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I am Peter. I'm a doctoral student at the Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium, but originally I am from Malawi. I am quite interested with the topic that was presented by Professor Majawa on spiritual maturity, which also leads into mature leadership. And this has a kind of a gap now in the formation of the religious as well as priests. And like in most of local contexts, this can be evidenced in the situation of like young priests, young sisters who maybe 2 years in the ministry, whatever, you see that they are implicated in issues of money, whatever, meaning that maybe the goal wasn't so much like a service, it was a different issue which needs to be really kind of addressed. But I just wanted to draw the attention of the conference to the contribution of the family to the spiritual maturity of priests and sisters, or the religious actually. Taking into consideration the condition of the family nowadays, how is it contributive to the formation of priests, of sisters, and how does kind of a candidate gain maturity, spiritual maturity, through the support of the family? In my intention, I see that the family is really very, very instrumental in the formation to the priesthood and the religious. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I am Sister Jacqueline Som, a sister of St. Therese of the Child Jesus from Cameroon. We are talking about transformational leadership. And I believe if we have good leaders in the church and in the society, we may not need to be organizing many seminars and congresses. Talking and very little is being implemented. And I want to go back to the fact that when we look at priests and religious in the society today, becoming a priest or religious is actually synonymous to becoming a leader. Everybody sees you as a leader. So I want to challenge us to go back to our formation programs and see what we can do to groom young people in formation to become the real transformational leaders that we need. Because tomorrow they'll be in the position of leadership and they'll be able to transform our society, not just talking and talking and talking. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Iken Okafor. a research professor at the University of Vienna. Originally, I'm coming from Nigeria. So my question, the Archbishop Fortunatus or Serde can answer this question. Both of you have emphasized the need for spiritual maturity, which translates into self-reliance and autonomy for the African church. But something was lacking. The role of the government, the political leaders, in shaping the destiny of the nation. We know, especially in Nigeria, that a political party can all of a sudden crash the economy, a growing economy, and push millions of people into multidimensional poverty. The problem that we often see is that the church, in view of such a situation, appears helpless or powerless. So I want you to address, how can the church in Africa summon the courage to confront the political leaders, to hold them accountable? Because if the church is working to establish endowment funds or whatever means that will lead us to self-reliance, and our political leaders are destroying what we have, destroying the future of the youth, I don't think we can make any headway with self-reliance. So how can we as church hold our political leaders accountable with courage like John the Baptist or Elijah? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to all the speakers. I'm Florence Osho from Nigeria, a lecturer at SS Peter and Paul. I just want to pick on the train of words Father Alex Ojako said. You know, from what he says, a leader has to be, sometimes in the midst of the people, sometimes above, sometimes below, sometimes, everywhere, all over, so to say. And I see in this, the leader adapting himself. So it's as if it's the leader that adapts himself to the followership. But in most cases, as we see in Africa, that leadership is a problem, both in the church and in the society at large. And it's like there's a lack of this understanding of a leader, adapting himself to his followership. Because what I see in the church and in the society is that it is the followership that has to adapt themselves to what the leaders, is doing. So it's like there's a lack of understanding of what leadership actually means for us Africans. It's a problem everywhere, but it's a problem peculiar to Africans. So what do we do? How do we come about to help, beginning with us in the church, as Sister said, for our leadership to be, in line with what you have said? Thank you.
Merci. Nous allons après prendre une personne et puis nous allons arrêter comme ça. Il y a un jeune qui veut parler ici. Après Chioma, je vais donner la parole à une.
I'm Chioma Asuzu, Professor of Clinical Psychology and Psycho-Oncology from the University of Ibadan. I wish to thank all the presenters for the beautiful presentations. Now my question. I want to find out the role of men, the role of laymen in accountability. What is their role? We are talking about accountability, having a self-reliant church. And we know statistically we get more women in the church than men. Why is it like this? I want to tell you, laymen want to know about the outcome of the harvest, want to know about the money that we generated, the money that is spent. They want to know the budget. They want to, because they are analytic in nature. Women are intuitive. And they will say, I will give. I trust the priest. I trust the bishop. They will manage it well. But I want to let you know, as a married woman, men are not like that. And we need their support to be able to generate funds. I quite believe that we have the money. We can generate it. but we need the support of men. A woman that is collaborating very effectively with the husband may not single-handedly donate as much as money she wants to donate.
Thank you, Professor Kishoma.
Thank you very much.
My name is Collins, a Nigerian, and I'm a doctoral researcher at KU Leuven. I'm sure we are all familiar with the expression that he who plays the piper detests the tone. And I'm making this contribution based on what Father Chikere and our dear Archbishop said. First, with the position of Chikere and other advocates of foreign aid. I disagree vehemently with us pushing and projecting foreign aid. And I said this also back in Leuven. We should, as Africans, start considering how to also give aid, especially the priests and religious. And I'm happy that the Archbishop is proposing missionary endowment funds. And I feel that's an initial getaway for Africans. However, we humbly request the Archbishop, although he has presented it to the President, we suggest that in his meetings with the bishops of the African continent, he should push this more, that we be able to have such endowment funds. Because presenting it here, majority of us still rely on the decisions of the bishops. I think it's a beginning. Thank you.
Je pense que nous allons, s'il vous plaît, nous allons prendre un dernier intervenant et donner la parole aux orateurs pour répondre. Il y a encore beaucoup de mains levées, mais nous avons encore toute la journée avec ce thème. Nous aurons l'opportunité de discuter. Si vous permettez, une dernière personne, et puis nous allons donner la parole à nos intervenants. Merci.
OK. Merci beaucoup. Merci aux intervenants. J'aimerais aborder un peu, poser une question, notamment aux conférenciers. Par rapport au leadership, je vais parler pour nous jeunes. Parce que je me dis qu'un bon leadership, ça doit inspirer et ça doit attirer. Mais la question que je me pose ou que je constate aujourd'hui, quel est le modèle de leadership qu'on veut pour nous les jeunes? Qui inspire le jeune aujourd'hui? Je ne sais pas dans les autres pays comment ça se passe, mais quand on demande à un jeune à qui veux-tu ressembler, à qui t'identifies-tu, je pense qu'on a un problème. On n'a même pas de repère. On ne sait pas. Alors qu'autrement, du moins autrefois, on avait Jésus-Christ, dont on a dit tout à l'heure, qui est notre modèle par expérience, qui est le leader par excellence. Si je ramène la vie de Jésus-Christ au contexte d'aujourd'hui, est-ce que si Jésus vivait aujourd'hui, est-ce qu'il serait le leader que les jeunes veulent? Est-ce qu'il va faire le même poids s'il était là encore aujourd'hui? Parce que les gens veulent, est-ce que c'est le leader, du moins le pécheur d'hommes, qui va pouvoir encore attirer les gens? Donc ça, c'est la question qui m'amène tout simplement à demander, Jésus-Christ étant notre modèle, comment est-ce qu'on peut actualiser le leadership afin de pouvoir avoir vraiment une vision chrétienne et avoir vraiment une foi très vivante en Afrique? On a un problème de repère et c'est ça que je voulais poser. Merci.
Merci, merci, merci. Donc, une dernière. OK, on va donner la parole.
On peut passer aux réponses. Peut-être que les réponses vont déjà répondre à ceux qui veulent parler. Si vous avez déjà donné qu'il parle, professeur, mais vraiment, excusez. Après lui, on va vraiment arrêter pour écouter nos intervenants, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you. It was a question which also Collins has addressed. Archbishop Fortunatus, I was very pleased about the suggestion you have made the local churches in Africa should also liberate some means to give some support to their missionaries abroad. And I wonder whether this can also not be extended to investing more in the formation of future professors and seminary professors. I'm myself working since several decades to make sure that many African students, priests, religious laity receive a study allowance to study at my faculty. But it is become a concern for us that due to higher costs of education and diminishing solidarity funds, sending institutions may in the future also have to share some financial co-responsibility as well. So maybe it's a question of making different financial priorities. And of course, I know that there are many great institutions in Africa as well where students can receive excellent formation, but for a diversified staff, maybe also in the future, it remains interesting to continue sending qualified students abroad sometimes as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Donc, nous allons passer la parole aux panélistes qui vont chacun avoir 2 minutes, Sœur Agnès.
Oui, 2
Oui,
minutes.
2
s'il
minutes.
vous plaît. Nous allons commencer par Monseigneur. Par vous, s'il vous plaît.
2 minutes. They said to me, 2 minutes. First thing, I begin with foreign aid mentality. I have, since I became secretary, been raising this problem of financial autonomy to bishops coming on Episcopal conference. On one occasion, the bishops of the conference in question reacted almost angrily. So let me let you know that there are efforts already. The second one is that of involving men. Of course, I mentioned the example of the Archdiocese of Lagos. The Caritas Lagos is run by men, lay persons, not necessarily by priests. So where the thing is well handled, lay people are also very effective. The same thing is applicable with the Archdiocese of Onitsha. It is not a thing just of priests. We have laymen that are also involved. And I think you're correct. We should involve lay persons more effectively. Regarding seminaries and formation centers, when I speak of endowment funds, I think the endowment funds should also include seminaries and places of formation, and not just ordinary pastoral, parochial pastoral initiatives. Regarding the fisherman's ring of the Pope, well, the Pope wears symbols that represent both the fisherman, that missionary dimension of being fishers of men, and then also the pastoral dimension. The Pope wears the fisherman's ring, but then he wears the pallium that represents his mandate as shepherd. You see the pallium with the extension in front, binding the Pope to Christ, and the extension behind, binding the rest. And then we have the role of layman, African leadership. Leadership in Africa, African leadership. Of course, we are not speaking of African traditional religion. We are speaking of the African church. So we are moving from the African traditional religion to the church in Africa. And that also includes pastoral conversion. And that is why we are insisting of the belt around the West, the belt of the Word of God, binding us to Christ, the leader. Thank you.
Thank you. Father Alex.
Thank you very much. Whether we're talking about evangelization, whether we're talking about financial accountability, whether we're talking about family and solidarity, I think the whole thing boils down to what we're looking at, namely leadership at all levels. And that's what we are setting out in our research. As I said before, there are more than 25 researchers coming from 11 different African countries who are doing a scientific study, investigation on the leadership in Africa and the church leadership in Africa, or it is lack thereof. It is presence, how is it developed, in order to be able to probably propose or advise on, we as PACTPAN, as practitioners, on how we can be able to strengthen this leadership in the church in Africa. So it is a process that is taking place, and we're hoping that we can be able, through the support of the Templeton Research Fund project, is funding, to be able to bring about ideas that can help us to see, appreciate, support, develop, and be able to lead ourselves as Africans towards a better synodal church. Thank you.
Thank you. Père Théogène, si vous voulez bien.
With regard to how to actualize or to make concrete the kind of self-reliance in Africa, I think the idea is to move from knowing what to knowing how. We have so many theories. In that case, I agree with Sister Jacqueline, who says that we come and talk, but at the end of the day, what comes out of our talks? I think there is that idea of knowing how. How do we do what we do? And why do we what we do? Because in that case, we can somehow check what we do, check what is available, what do we have, what kind of resources we have available, what personnel, what kind of human resources we have, non-human resources, and from there we can then orient them in what we want. So just think about that idea of knowing how, and take time. Then in my paper I had elaborate on strategies, and one of them is take time and think, and then act, build competencies, strive to acquire knowledge through education, invest in the capacity to master problem solving, identify problems, and try to find solutions. Then, that is also very crucial to the strategies. Try to manage what you have wisely and transparently. That is what someone actually talked about. How do you use, for instance, cars you have, fields you have in the parish? How do you use the available resources? Then foster resilience, and I agree on the idea that self-reliance is not isolation. One of the strategies is to foster communication and network. Strong communication and networking are crucial for self-reliance because it gives more autonomy, more comfort, and more room to be able to think for yourself. So there is many possibilities. And then to the last point I would mention in this idea of how to make self-reliance possible is actually to communicate about what we do. When I visit different places and dioceses, congregations, there are some who are really highly advanced, but others don't know what is going there. what is going, for instance, in Côte d'Ivoire, what is going on in Senegal, what is going in DRC, what's going on in Malawi. So there is a need of connecting our efforts, knowing what others are doing, and then learn from each other. And that is also the idea of having people who are really deeply, who have deep information about what is going on, about what to do. Some professionals, just not doing things out of nowhere. Learn and act. That is, I think, one of the bases for being self-reliant.
Thank you, Father. Nous allons redonner la parole à Son Excellence qui va ajouter quelques éléments par rapport à une question qui est restée en suspens. Merci bien.
I just wanted to mention two things. First one is that with regard to self-sustenance of the local churches, in our dicastery, which is a dicastery that takes care of the support of the Holy Father and of the Universal Church to all the churches in Africa, most of the churches in Asia, that is the whole of Asia, except the Philippines. In the Philippines, we have only 6 territories. And then we have the whole of China, continental China and Taiwan, and then the whole of Oceania, the whole of the Caribbean, and many territories in Latin America. I have been insisting that when submitting subsidies, we start submitting subsidies that are aimed at self-sustenance of the local churches. Let us bear that in mind, whether they are local churches or religious congregations, when such subsidies could be sent and you will get support. Then there is also, with regard to the establishment of endowment funds, please, all of us are involved. Somebody spoke about the style of life of priests and religious. Sometimes also dioceses or congregations ask us to contribute. How ready are we to let go a little percentage of what we are given for the service we offer? If the diocese or the congregation were to ask us in order to set up these funds, that is the way to go. And then there is the one of confronting political powers. I thank you on that. But that could also become a distraction. It could be a distraction. We are not churches to become political parties. Of course, we are to be prophetic and speak out. But let it not be a distraction. We have to be focused on the initiatives of the church. We should not make the same mistakes that the politicians make. The church, when I was in Italy newly, the Italian government was failing, collapsing almost every 6 months. But the Italian economy was going ahead as though nothing was happening. We could also have our church initiatives. Please, churches, we are not to invest in housing, that is lodgings. But how many churches have got malls, supermarkets that could be rented out? Why don't we train priests in the area of administration to get invested? I have seen poor churches in Nicaragua, in Paraguay, in other places that are able to invest and are able to sustain themselves, and not only themselves, also other younger and poorer churches. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have also a few, 3 observations. first of all, to thank all the contributors for the helpful and transformative, contributions towards this issue of mature spirituality for a transformative leadership. Number one, what has been said, if it contributed, touches the area of what is referred to as the 3 Fs. In order for spirituality to be holistic, to be mature in leadership, it has to be informative, to inform the mind, and then again to be formative of the heart, and again transformative on the ground, which also raises 2 other factors, and that is got to do with reformative for permanence. And number 2, the area of self-reliance is very, very important again for us. But again, I think even researchers contributed to this issue of self-reliance. Scholars like Magesa, scholars like John Healy, Patrick Kalilombe, they are saying self-reliance should not be seen in isolation, but together with the self-ministering and also self-critiquing. But it's very, very important for us. So when we are talking about mature spirituality for transformative leadership, it must be looked at holistically, in this way. And then maybe also, finally, maybe on a lighter but serious note, Africa, in my view, also is already doing something positive, let's say, to the West. Yeah, now many scholars, many missionaries, going that area again to make a contribution. In particular, for example, I will talk about the Catholic University of Eastern Africa in Nairobi, Choir. I mean, for example, the Faculty of Theology at the moment having over 23 bishops which are working across, the continent. I think it's something positive also. And then again, also the contributors having students, again from Europe, again from US at our place. So I think to me also that is something positive when it comes to that mature, responsible, and permanent spiritual maturity for transformative leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup à nos intervenants. Merci pour toutes les contributions, les questions. Je sais que nous n'avons pas terminé. Il y a encore des questions, des contributions que nous voulons apporter. Mais je vous assure que nous aurons encore un autre moment de palabres sur le même thème du leadership spirituel. Si vous le voulez bien, nous allons maintenant prendre une petite pause pour nous refaire. 10 pauses, s'il vous plaît, pour boire et marcher un peu. Et nous reviendrons pour la dernière partie de la session de ce matin à 12h40. On peut revenir à 12h40 où nous allons parler de la palabre, faire une palabre sur le leadership spirituel dans l'Église. Merci bien. Oui, pendant la pause, nous pouvons visiter les stands où nous avons exposé les livres du PACTPAN, des articles confessionnés par nos jeunes qui ont parlé hier. Et donc, ils ont exposé derrière, au fond de la salle. Nous pouvons faire un tour pour visiter et acheter. Je donne la parole à qui va montrer les livres.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And yes, could be evening somewhere else, those that are watching us. I would like to inform you that there's nothing very sad coming for a conference or a congress like this, and you go home empty. You tell people, see, I went to the conference, and there are books like these, and the writers are here. So the best thing is to buy a book, get the writer to sign for you, and you'll be proud, seeing a person face to face who has written. This book is there, is being sold there. It's a publication from Pan-African Catholic Theology. We have a few books. This is very recent. And we have also this book. And we have another book here. And all those that attended the Palaver, all what was said, it's here. His Eminence, your talks, your presentations are here. And I would love your bishop's friends to get one book and read what was composed after what you said. We also have a small diary here. When you scan, you'll see what's happening within PACTPAN every time something is happening within the PACTPAN field. And again, it's good to have the person that has written all of those people that have written these books are here to sign for you, and you'll be proud. We also have this book, Any Formation House. You keep on talking about formation, about leadership transformation. It's all about here. Any formation seminary, formation house, without this book, it's not a formation house. Coming from PACTPAN, it's not a formation house. We also have this beautiful t-shirt. My friends, please, 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 that is true, 3 pleases. Do not go home without this t-shirt. These t-shirts were made for you. And buying these t-shirts will make this Congress memorable. So tomorrow we are going to take a picture, each one of us wearing these t-shirts. It's just $5. You can calculate how you want to calculate it with your money. There are other t-shirts being sold there. That can be a second part of it. But please, please, unfortunately, I needed to wear one. I have one already. Buy these t-shirts. We need it tomorrow. There is that part of it. And this is the last one. Please, this is not for your pocket. Most of us are going with these. When you have finished, you leave it there. This is not for you to go home with. We are missing it somewhere there. Please, you just bring it and you sit there.
Thank you. Thank you, sister. On peut prendre la pause, s'il vous plaît. 10 minutes de pause et nous revenons à 12h40. Merci.
Ok, merci. On applaudit encore. Très, très fort nos intervenants. On va les libérer.
Merci, merci, merci. Merci. Le débat continue.
On fait la photo avec.
S'il vous plaît, il est 12h40. Nous pouvons commencer à reprendre place. Si vous voulez bien, nous allons donner la possibilité à notre éminence, à nos évêques, de boire un peu d'eau. Et nous commençons à reprendre place, s'il vous plaît. Merci de commencer à reprendre place, s'il vous plaît. Coach Désiré, anglais. Il est l'heure, il faut qu'on recommence. Il est l'heure, il faut parler en anglais. Sinon, on ne va pas s'en sortir. S'il vous plaît, merci de commencer à reprendre place. Juste l'heure dit de commencer à reprendre place. Je vais donner à boire aux évêques que j'arrive. S'il vous plaît, sinon on ne va pas s'en sortir.
Ok, nous allons reprendre pour 1 heure encore. Est-ce que nous pouvons prendre place? Nous reprenons. Yes. Please, can you have a seat? We have to restart. Please, have a seat.
Qui circulent, ceux qui veulent avoir une carte SIM avec connexion Internet, ils doivent s'inscrire.
Okay.
On a trouvé un agent. Et puis pour les casques, de ne pas oublier de remettre les casques.
Okay.
Et puis il y a un médecin dans la salle, parce qu'il y a quelques malaises, il doit ouvrir là-bas. C'est qu'il faut là-bas.
Ok.
Et ça, on a déjà annoncé ça pour les t-shirts. Ça, on laisse tomber.
Oui, merci. Ok. Please have a seat. Have a seat. Please have a seat. We have to continue. Yes, it's okay. Last picture. Please, reprenons nos places. Okay. It's okay now. Yes. Have a seat. Reprenons nos places, nous continuons. Reprenons nos places, nous continuons. Can we have a seat, please? Nous allons continuer les achats après. Donc, reprenons nos places. Reprenons nos places. Nous allons continuer. Ok. Je fais quelques annonces, après je te passe là.
Oui, les annonces là, on va laisser à la fin. Parce
Une
qu'il
fiche
débat.
ici.
C'est quoi?
Reprenons nos places. Reprenons nos places. Aïe. Professor, Sister Agnes said that we are going to announce at the end.
Yes.
Not now. Yes. Okay. The color is
White, blue, black, multicolored.
multicolored. Okay.
Merci de reprendre place. Nous allons procéder avec la dernière partie de notre session de ce matin. Merci de reprendre place, s'il vous plaît. J'invite la mère Rita Yamba, présidente de la COSMAM, à nous rejoindre pour la présidence. Edel Akigir, à nous rejoindre aussi. Professeur Mary Guetui. Et Georges Mbembouzou. Merci de nous rejoindre ici. Donc maintenant, nos échanges vont porter toujours sur le leadership spirituel en Afrique. Nous allons écouter son éminence, le cardinal Abongo. Ensuite, nous écouterons la mère Rita Yamba et d'elle, la professeure Mary et Georges Membouzou. Merci à son éminence qui reste encore avec nous pour un peu. Merci beaucoup. On vous fatigue, hein? Merci. Merci, ma mère. Parlez français. Il faut donner la parole au cardinal. Au cardinal, tu peux répéter le thème, s'il vous plaît.
Okay, we are going to continue. Nous allons continuer avec son éminence, le cardinal Fridolin Abongo, qui va nous introduire la palabre spirituelle leadership en Afrique. Éminence, je vous donne le micro. Bien, vous allez utiliser celui-ci.
C'est pas allumé.
Si, c'est allumé. Ok, c'est allumé.
Merci beaucoup. Parlant de leadership spirituel religieux, comme nous avons entendu cet avant-midi, c'est une notion capitale pour l'avenir de notre continent, l'Afrique. Et en écoutant les uns et les autres cet avant-midi, j'ai vite compris que la notion de leadership est d'abord une notion éthique. Parce que quand on dit leadership, ça signifie cette capacité qu'a quelqu'un, qu'a quelqu'une à mobiliser, à entraîner les autres, à pousser les autres dans une certaine direction dans le but d'atteindre un objectif bien défini, un objectif que l'ensemble du groupe s'est donné lui-même comme son objectif. Et le rôle du leader, c'est d'encourager les autres, les exhorter, les pousser dans certains cas, un peu comme Moïse dans le désert, parce qu'il croit que le bien de son peuple se trouve de l'autre côté du désert. Et pour y accéder, mais il faut traverser le désert, il faut traverser la mer Rouge. Des fois, le leader est incompris. Des fois, le leader est désavoué par ceux-mêmes pour qui il est en train de lutter. C'est dire, si nous parlons de cette notion de leadership en Afrique, partons aussi du principe que le leadership est essentiellement une notion éthique. Et nous nous rendons compte au niveau de l'Afrique, que ce soit dans la société et malheureusement parfois dans l'Église, cette notion éthique n'est pas là. Il y a des gens qui se déclarent leaders, mais ils sont leaders en poursuivant leurs intérêts égoïstes, que ce soit dans le domaine politique, économique et parfois religieux. Que des gens qui se disent religieux, dans mon pays, le Congo, des pasteurs et parfois nous, des prêtres, des évêques, on se dit leader, mais ce qu'on poursuit, c'est d'abord ses intérêts égoïstes. Il n'y a rien de leadership là-dedans. On utilise la population, on parle au nom d'un groupe, mais en réalité, ce qu'on poursuit, ce sont ses intérêts égoïstes. Le simple fait qu'on a étudié, qu'on a un diplôme, est-ce que cela fait de nous des leaders? Je ne crois pas. Le simple fait qu'on soit prêtre ou consacré, est-ce que cela fait de nous des leaders? Aussi longtemps que cette dimension éthique et un leader est nécessairement un homme, une femme passionné de l'homme. Il a la passion de l'homme, la passion de ses frères et sœurs. Et toute sa vie, c'est en fonction de cet objectif qui est poursuivi. De telle sorte que le leader peut même mettre entre parenthèses ses intérêts à lui. Et le vrai leader meurt pauvre, un peu comme Thomas Sankara au Burkina Faso, comme Lumumba au Congo. Ça, ce sont des leaders. Ils se battent pour la communauté, pour le groupe. Ils ne se battent pas pour eux. Mais la réalité de l'Afrique d'aujourd'hui, sur le plan politique, nous avons des dirigeants qui se disent leaders. Mais en quoi ils sont des leaders? Dès lors qu'ils ne poursuivent que la jouissance et leur intérêt, l'intérêt de leur famille, de leurs amis, et ils oublient le reste de la population. Et ces dangers se vérifient aussi dans l'Église. Nous nous disons des leaders. Cette année, moi je suis évêque depuis 20 ans. Je suis évêque. Mais jamais de fois, dans nos réunions des évêques, nous avons abordé par exemple la question de l'autonomie financière en donnant la parole à chaque évêque qui parle de sa situation financière. La situation financière, c'est un tabou, on n'en parle pas. Chacun se débrouille. Et pourtant, nous savons qu'il y a des diocèses qui sont dans des situations extrêmement difficiles. Mais on n'en parle pas, on se débrouille.
Voilà pourquoi, avant de laisser la parole à ceux qui ont été préparés pour le faire, si nous voulons aller vraiment de l'avant et jouer notre rôle dans cette notion de leadership, nous devons d'abord commencer par nous remettre en question. La remise en question. La remise en question par rapport à notre façon de faire aujourd'hui. Et ça va ensemble avec notre autonomie mentale, surtout mentale, qui a des implications sur l'autonomie économico-financière. Nous sommes restés, comme disait Monseigneur Fortunatus aujourd'hui, nous sommes restés avec une mentalité qui ne nous aide pas à évoluer et à jouer vraiment le rôle de leadership. Il y a un philosophe congolais qui avait écrit tout de suite après l'indépendance une thèse de doctorat et le titre de sa thèse, c'était « La remise en question, base de la décolonisation mentale ». Il s'appelait Mabika Kalanda. La remise en question, base de la décolonisation mentale. Notre mentalité est restée la mentalité d'éternels mendiants. Les éternels mendiants. Les éternels dépendants. Et on le voit même dans certaines thèses que nous faisons. Allez voir les titres, les thèses que les étudiants congolais et africains défendent en Occident. Généralement, ce sont des thèses qui portent sur la pensée de tel, la pensée de tel. Mais il a déjà dit, toi tu vas dire la même chose que lui a déjà dit. Quand est-ce que nous allons commencer à faire des thèses sur les problématiques purement africaines? Je m'arrête là. Je redonne la parole aux modératrices pour nous introduire dans la matière. La remise en question.
Merci beaucoup, Excellence, Son Éminence. Alors, nous allons passer la parole à la mère Rita Yamba, qui est présidente de la COSMAM, qui va intervenir sur le leadership spirituel en Afrique. Mère Rita, vous avez la parole.
Éminence. Merci beaucoup pour la parole. Je suis sœur Rita Yamba, fille de Saint-Paul, supérieure déléguée pour la délégation de la République démocratique du Congo et de la Côte d'Ivoire. Je suis aussi présidente de la COSMAM, la Confédération des conférences des supérieurs majeurs de l'Afrique et de Madagascar. Aussi vice-présidente de la conférence des supérieurs majeurs de la RDC. Je vais vous entretenir sur le thème « L'avenir de l'Église et de la société en Afrique, mission de la COSMAM ». Pour commencer, nous remercions les organisateurs de ces congrès pour nous avoir donné l'opportunité de vivre dans l'esprit de la synodalité ces moments où nous sommes conviés à cheminer ensemble dans la prière, la réflexion et la proximité physique. Dans le contexte africain, ce cheminement est mis en difficulté à cause de beaucoup de défis. D'où notre question. Comment pouvons-nous, en tant qu'Église Famille de Dieu en Afrique et Madagascar, cheminer ensemble dans l'espérance face aux défis qui nous attendent? Pour répondre à cette question, notre intervention considérera 4 points. Une vision pour l'Afrique, la mission de la COSMAM, les défis et les actions concrètes, et enfin, l'avenir de notre Église et de notre société. Pour chaque point, nous allons illustrer à l'aide d'un proverbe d'un exemple et d'un verset biblique. Et je vous épargne de tous les détails, je vais faire la synthèse et vous aurez les textes pour les parcourir. Quelle vision comme COSMAM avons-nous pour l'Afrique? Depuis les origines de cette confédération africaine, des conférences des supérieurs majeures, la vision tenace et persistante est d'une Afrique unie et libre, ouverte à la grâce de Dieu à travers diverses formes de consécration et de vocations religieuses, dans la paix, la maturité, l'autonomie et la justice. Une telle vision se trouve recherchée au regard des temps de violence, d'oppression, d'injustice, de pauvreté et de maladies. Les 2 synodes pour l'Afrique qui ont donné lieu à 2 importantes exhortations post-synodales, Ecclesia in Africa et Afrique Munus, mettent en lumière une Afrique meurtrie, martyrisée, mais possédant des potentialités humaines et spirituelles immenses. Notre vision pour l'Afrique est celle d'un continent renaissant de ses cendres et offrant à son peuple, surtout à sa jeunesse, de nouvelles opportunités de vie et d'action, d'engagement et de transformation. Nous voulons une Afrique où toute personne humaine soit respectée dans sa dignité de fils et de fille de Dieu. Une telle Afrique doit être construite avec le concours de tous, en particulier par les personnes consacrées dans la diversité des formes de vie, des situations de mission et d'appartenance nationale ou régionale. Pour rendre réelle une telle vision, la COSMAM met en lumière l'importance de la synodalité et l'éclairage de l'espérance. La synodalité est cruciale car elle permet d'inclure et d'écouter toutes les voix au sein de l'Église, favorisant ainsi une Église représentative et dynamique. La synodalité est un chemin de renouveau spirituel et de réformes structurelles pour rendre l'Église plus participative et missionnaire. Confère document final du synode numéro 28. Cela renforce la communion et l'engagement des fidèles. Cette compréhension de la synodalité a été mise en lumière lors du symposium de la COSMAM tenu à Pretoria du 23 au 25 mai 2025 sous le thème « Espérance, synodalité et autonomisation de la vie consacrée en Afrique », où son éminence le cardinal Fridolin Ambongo Besungu, président du CHEAM, le cardinal Stephen Brisley et les autres intervenants nous avions fait prendre conscience que l'espérance nous met en mouvement dans la foi et l'amour. C'est le moteur qui nous pousse à marcher ensemble, à écouter, à discerner et à changer notre regard. Une église synodale est un signe d'espérance pour le monde, car c'est une église qui écoute, marche avec le plus démuni, les blessés de la vie et qui cherche la communion dans l'amour et la solidarité. Par exemple, lors des assemblées des conférences épiscopales d'Afrique, CHEAM, les évêques se réunissent pour discuter des défis contemporains tels que la pauvreté et les conflits. En écoutant les voix des laïcs, des jeunes et des femmes, ils peuvent élaborer des stratégies qui répondent réellement aux besoins des communautés locales, rendant ainsi l'Église plus pertinente et engagée. Cela nous amène à considérer un proverbe africain qui aussi est commun dans d'autres parties du monde. Ce proverbe rappelle l'importance de la collaboration et de l'unité. L'union fait la force. Les proverbes soulignent que lorsque les individus travaillent ensemble, ils peuvent surmonter des obstacles, atteindre des objectifs plus ambitieux. Cela s'inscrit parfaitement dans l'esprit de la synodalité et de l'engagement communautaire. Ce qu'évoque aussi le verset biblique, car là où 2 ou 3 sont réunis à mon nom, je suis là au milieu d'eux. Ces passages rappellent que la communion et l'écoute des uns envers les autres sont fondamentales pour la présence divine au sein de la communauté. Église comme phare d'espérance. L'Église peut être un phare d'espérance en offrant des solutions concrètes aux problèmes sociaux, les conflits, la pauvreté, les inégalités, en soutenant les plus vulnérables et en promouvant la paix et la justice. Nous pouvons renforcer cette idée avec le numéro 1 de la Bible d'induction de l'année jubilaire, Spes non confundit. Tout le monde espère, l'espérance est contenue dans le cœur de chaque personne. Nous voulons être pour nos contemporains cet arbre à l'abri duquel ils pourront se reposer, cet arbre qui pourra purifier l'air autour d'eux, cet arbre qui pourra les guérir de leurs maux, cet arbre qui pourra les nourrir. Comme disait sœur Simona Brambila, préfète pour les instituts de vie consacrée et les sociétés de vie apostolique, dans son exposé sur la vie consacrée en Afrique, pèlerin de l'espérance, lors de la 6e Assemblée générale de la COSMAM à Pretoria, mai 2025. En guise d'exemple, dans de nombreuses régions touchées par les conflits, l'Église joue un rôle crucial en offrant des abris temporaires et des services de soutien psychologique aux personnes déplacées, telles qu'en République démocratique du Congo, des paroisses et des communautés religieuses ont ouvert leurs portes pour accueillir des familles victimes de la violence, leur fournissant non seulement un toit, mais aussi des repos, des aides financières et un accompagnement spirituel. Cette initiative montre bien ce que dit le proverbe africain, un seul brin de mil ne fait pas de farine. Le proverbe met en évidence plusieurs valeurs importantes telles que la coopération, la patience, la connaissance de l'importance de chaque individu dans un effort collectif, rappelant que chaque contribution, même petite, est précieuse. Cette notion de justice et solidarité est également ancrée dans les Écritures. Ainsi, nous pouvons lire dans Matthieu 5, 6, « Heureux ceux qui ont faim et soif de la justice, car ils seront appelés fils de Dieu. » Les versets soulignent l'importance de la justice sociale et de l'engagement de l'Église à œuvrer pour un monde meilleur. Après avoir considéré cette vision, nous regardons la mission de la COSMAM. La COSMAM travaille à renforcer la communion, la formation et le leadership des religieux, ainsi qu'à soutenir leurs activités pastorales, éducatives, sociales et spirituelles. La COSMAM a pour mission de développer la communion et la collaboration entre les instituts de vie consacrée et les sociétés de vie apostolique pour promouvoir le royaume de Dieu dans le respect et l'autonomie selon les constitutions, les charismes spécifiques de chaque institut. La COSUMA encourage aussi l'inculturation de la vie consacrée en Afrique et à Madagascar. Elle renforce les relations entre les conférences des supérieurs majeurs et les conférences épiscopales pour un témoignage prophétique de l'Église. Une telle vision ne va pas sans difficulté, comme le met en lumière ce proverbe africain. Celui qui ne sait pas danser dit que la pluie est trop forte. Ces proverbes soulignent l'idée que ceux qui ne s'engagent pas ou qui ne font pas preuve de dévouement peuvent facilement critiquer ou se dérober au défi. En revanche, ceux qui sont prêts à donner leur temps, leur énergie, même dans des conditions difficiles, démontrent un véritable amour et un engagement envers les autres. Cela renforce l'idée que les sacrifices et les services sont des manifestations profondes de l'amour. Pour prouver davantage, nous pouvons nous tourner vers le verset biblique qui résonne avec cette notion. Il n'y a pas de plus grand amour que de donner sa vie pour ses amis. Jean 15, 13. Ce passage met en lumière l'esprit de service et de dévouement qui anime les personnes consacrées dans leur mission pastorale et sociale. Face aux défis croissants que rencontrent les personnes consacrées en Afrique et à Madagascar, la mission de la COSMAM se révèle importante et urgente. 3. Défis et actions concrètes de la COSMAM. Notre continent est marqué par toutes sortes de crises, les crises sociales, écologiques, économiques, les conflits, la pauvreté, les inégalités. Il est essentiel de reconnaître ces défis pour mieux y répondre. La COSMAM fait l'effort de s'adapter et innover pour rester pertinente dans un contexte en constante évolution. Ces réalités nous font penser à un proverbe africain: la pluie ne tombe pas sur un seul toit. Les proverbes rappellent que les difficultés touchent tout le monde et qu'il est important de se soutenir mutuellement. Et la Bible nous dit: portez les fardeaux les uns des autres et vous accomplirez ainsi la loi du Christ. Galates 6, 2. D'accord. Au vu des défis, des actions concrètes à mettre en œuvre, la COSIMA et l'Église prend le devant avec des actions qui s'appuient sur les valeurs de communion et de collaboration. Actions concrètes, nous pouvons retenir la formation des religieuses financée par nos partenaires comme la Fondation Hilton et Missio. Et nous sommes ici avec PACTPAN. Et dans ce sens, nous voulons aussi que ces partenariats avec PACTPAN soient salués et encouragés. Dernier point, c'est l'avenir de l'Église et de la société. L'avenir de notre Église et de notre société africaine dépend fondamentalement de la manière dont nous faisons face aux défis. Il dépend de nos capacités à dépasser toute limite historique, linguistique, tribale ou régionale afin de voir grand. Cet avenir est à construire en misant sur la jeunesse dans l'Église et dans la société. C'est dans ce sens que la COSMAM réfléchit sur les voies les meilleures pour offrir à la jeunesse des opportunités de leadership et pour les impliquer dans les projets communautaires. Cela peut se faire par des programmes de mentorat et de formation adaptées. L'éducation s'impose, donc l'accompagnement de la jeunesse est très important. Avoir l'ouverture envers cette jeunesse, l'écouter et trouver de nouvelles manières d'être et de travailler, de vivre et d'espérer. Nous voulons nous engager en faveur de la jeunesse. Des personnes consacrées transmettent à cette jeunesse quelque chose de leur foi, de leur attachement au Christ. Ainsi, les proverbes africains nous disent: l'arbre qui tombe fait de bruit que la forêt qui pousse. Les proverbes rappellent que les actions des jeunes, même si elles peuvent sembler discrètes au départ, sont essentielles pour le développement durable de la société. Et le verset biblique: que personne ne méprise ta jeunesse, mais sois un modèle pour les croyants en parole, en conduite, en amour et en pureté. Timothée 1,12. Pour conclure, nous sommes plus que jamais conscients que l'Afrique a besoin plus de personnes engagées, créatrices, mobilisatrices, que de beaux parleurs. Pour un travail sérieux, une discipline de vie, une implication de tous, nous pouvons réaliser de grandes choses qui ne soient pas uniquement la gloire du passé. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes au rendez-vous où Dieu espère réaliser avec nous beaucoup de choses. Notre engagement de foi et d'humanité est toujours plus incontournable. J'avais mis quelques questions ici, 2 questions. Sommes-nous convaincus des potentialités que nous avons, mieux que nous sommes pour la transformation de notre Église et de notre société? Quelle action ou initiative reçue pouvez-vous partager avec les autres? Pour la COSMAM, des moments vécus de communion font entrevoir des points lumineux d'une autre Afrique. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Mère Rita. Chacun peut répondre à ces 2 dernières questions. Alors, nous allons immédiatement introduire le Père. Ok, c'est pas le Père, non. Ok, Edel Akidir, qui va également sous son angle, nous parler de ce leadership spirituel en Afrique. Vous avez la parole.
Spiritual leadership in Africa, and I'm focusing on navigating faith, culture, and responsibility. My name is Idel Queen Clementina Aki, popularly known as Idel for PACTPAN. I am a social impact advocate, assistant program director, and project manager. I am also working on girls in schools and communities on sexual and gender-based violence. Africa is a continent deeply anchored in spirituality and enriched by diverse religious traditions. For me, spiritual leadership transcends religious titles. It is about influence, responsibility, and the power to transform individuals and communities. Whether in Christianity, Islam, or African traditional religions, spiritual leaders have long played critical roles in shaping moral values, fostering unity, and driving social change. Spiritual leadership in Africa is not merely about religion. It is fundamentally about life. It manifests in diverse ways across different cultures, languages, and traditions. True spiritual leadership is not defined by position or hierarchy, but by hearts for service, integrity, and purposeful living. It is about those who lead with conviction, uplift others, and inspire transformation. And more importantly, our youths have a vital role to play in spiritual leadership. At the heart of African spiritual leaderships are two profound African values: Ubuntu, the belief in our shared humanity, and Umoja, the principle of unity and togetherness. These values remind us that leadership is not self-serving, but collective. It is about compassion, connection, and the common good. Examples of spiritual leadership in Africa, we have the rural pastors. Often without formal theological training, these leaders demonstrate unwavering faith and dedication to their communities. Grassroots activists, spiritually driven individuals initiating transformative action in undeserved areas. Religious and traditional leaders, from Christian pastors and Muslim imams to traditional healers, they provide moral guidance and preserve culture. The key attributes of spiritual leaders: deep faith and conviction. Spiritual leaders are defined by their unwavering trust in the divine. Their relationship with God is the foundation of their leadership. This connection fuels their resilience, encourages others to follow their example, and enables them to make decisions anchored in spiritual faith. And this is where we have leadership by example. Moral integrity. Integrity is at the heart of effective spiritual leadership. These leaders must walk their talk. Their words and actions must go in line, upholding truth, fairness, and righteousness, even when it is inconvenient. Maintaining transparency in their dealings, consistency in their character, and accountability in their service. Their lives should inspire trust and set a standard for the communities they lead. Visionary guidance. A spiritual leader is a visionary. They see beyond the present moment and guide others towards a future aligned with divine will. Their vision goes beyond institutional goals to embrace the spiritual and well-being of individuals and communities. They inspire hope, purpose, and action by connecting people to a higher calling. Servant leadership. As a spiritual leader, you are called to serve. They do not seek to dominate, but to serve, particularly the poor, oppressed, and vulnerable. They prioritize the needs of others over personal gain and see leadership as an opportunity to uplift and empower. Their service is sacrificial, empathetic, and motivated by love. Prophetic boldness. One of the most crucial yet challenging roles of spiritual leadership is speaking truth to power. Prophetic boldness means having the courage to confront injustice, corruption, or moral decay in society, even when doing so invites criticism or danger. These leaders challenge both secular and religious authorities when necessary, advocating for the voiceless and promoting righteousness. Cultural sensitivity. African societies are rich in diverse traditions, languages, and customs. Effective spiritual leaders embrace and respect this cultural diversity. They strive to understand the cultural context of their followers and communicate spiritual truth in ways that resonate deeply. At the same time, they confront cultural practices that harm human dignity, such as gender discrimination or harmful rights. We have the likes of female genital mutilation, the breast ironing, advocating for transformative change. Emotional and spiritual intelligence. Leading others requires more than charisma. It demands the ability to understand and navigate the emotional and spiritual needs of individuals. Spiritual leaders should be compassionate listeners, wise counselors, and designing guides. Their emotional intelligence allows them to relate empathetically with others. So when we put ourselves in other people's shoes, we tend to have a better society. The role of spiritual leaders in Africa. Moral and ethical leadership. They act as the conscience of society, confronting the morals, the moral decays that goes on in our country. Example, faith-based condemnation of electoral violence in Africa, peace building and conflict resolution. They play a pivotal role in healing and peace efforts, especially in conflict zones. Preserving cultural identity. Spiritual leaders help reclaim and affirm African spirituality in ways that integrate cultural and religious identity. We have a lot of challenges facing spiritual leadership in Africa. We have the commercialization of faith, where we have prosperity-driven churches, miracle centers, where their congregation, their parishioners are being exploited, fake prophecy, and monetization of hope. Loss of prophetic voice, where past leaders boldly confronted injustice. Today, many are aligned with corrupt political systems or remain silent in the face of oppression. The pulpit has, in some cases, become an extension of political propaganda.
1 minute remains.
Gender inequality. As the author, Faith Wambura Ngujiri, she wrote in her book, Leadership for Women, she says, African women leaders don't wait for permission. They lead from where they are. And so, dear listeners, I want to put these questions to us today. What kind of leadership do we need in Africa? We need leaders who will serve rather than dominate. Leaders who listen rather than merely preach. And so I'm leaving us with this word of reflection that says, when leadership is rooted in truth, no storm can shake it. A spiritual leader is not just a voice from above, but an ear to the ground. And so finally, to everyone, don't wait for a title to lead. Don't be silent when you can speak. Don't underestimate your spirit, your voice, and your influence. And so I hope I have been able to inspire and not just inform you that spiritual leadership is, above all, service to humanity and thus service to God. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. What we can notice is that everyone is a leader. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Edel Akidir. We can realize that we have a lot to say about leadership. We are going to move forward with Professor Mary Getu. She will also talk about this amazing spiritual leadership in Africa. Professor, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay, it's okay.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. Gatherings such as this are a learning opportunity, networking, and talking about the day-to-day issues of our lives. I'm glad to share a few ideas about spiritual leadership in Africa. And some of the ideas I'm going to share have already been said, and as a teacher, when there is repetition, then we need to take great care of that particular point. And I'll start by saying that leadership is about everyday life, is about our day-to-day experiences. For example, which are the decisions and choices we make over small and big things, such as what do I eat and how do I eat? Where do I go? What do I do? Who do I interact with? Do I vote or do I not? Do I invest? What about vocation? Because in a gathering such as this, we have those who are in family, we have those who are in religious life. All these issues, they may look small, but they have to do with leadership. Oftentimes, however, the mention of the word leadership ropes in politics. And when we are talking about politics, especially in Africa, we are talking about campaigns, we are talking about cutthroat competition, we are talking about trickery, we are talking about survival, we are talking about power. I like to refer to a book by John Stanko, where he says, so many leaders, but such little leadership. This causes us to ask a fundamental question. What is the distinct difference between a leader and leadership? There are many who claim to be leaders. And as I've said, probably through campaign, my sister here has talked about prosperity gospel, self-proclaimed leaders, popularity, charism. These could be prevailing, but are they really providing leadership? Then, again, my sister just said, there are those, each one of us is a leader in whichever way. Could we be leaders without commitment? For example, irresponsible parents. Yesterday, Chioma said that we started from the family, we started from ourselves. Many of us here are teachers. Are we playing a leadership role in the way we deal with our students? In this gathering, we have the youth, we have the adults. What is it that we learn from each other? Mentorship is not about necessarily the younger learning from the older, but even the older learning from the younger. Again, the fundamental question that comes here is, a title goes with responsibility. So, if I'm a teacher, if I'm a parent, if I'm a business person, whatever it is that I'm doing, that title comes with responsibility. It comes with leadership. In Africa, and this has been said earlier, this distinction between leader and leadership has contributed to a large degree of misery, poor delivery of services, hopelessness, and apathy in a country, in a continent that is full of immense resources. Natural resources, including the people themselves as resource number one. What then is the added value of spiritual leadership? This is well responded to in the African indigenous context, where there was, and there should be, a thin line between secular and spiritual leadership, because the leader carried both duties amicably, as a secular leader and at the same time as a spiritual leader. Gieke Kwame, writing from the Ghanaian context, summarizes the leader who concurrently provides spiritual and secular leadership as this way: that leadership is divinely sanctioned. And this then puts a challenge on the self-proclaimed or the leadership that has a title but forgets the responsibilities that go with it. Again, in the African indigenous context, there was a clear path, clear criteria as to who played which role in the society. And whichever role you had, remember, it is divinely sanctioned. The coronation process and the ceremony that gave one leadership position was owned by the people, including the presence of children. I am a grandmother, and the power of remembrance in children. They will remember that you were coronated. They remember that ceremony. They remember it very clearly, and they will hold you accountable. One of the speakers here has talked about visionary and future. Taking office was public and solemn. Sometimes we have short memories when we forget the vows that we have made. As a teacher, I'm governed by professional ethics and everybody else in their profession. So taking of office is a very solemn responsibility. Gieke says that the leader who took a solemn oath was bound by what they uttered during that ceremony. And leadership, again, this has been said many, many times this morning, is for service to the people and not for personal gain. What are some of the promises that the leader is expected to be guided by in their leadership? One of them is availability. Having an approach of consulting with others, because none of us owns it all, or none of us owns it all or knows it all. And the other one is trying to be balanced, particularly having commitment to family and communal values. Ubuntu, Ujamaa, Harambe, all these. And also integrity, being faithful to your word, and also being aware of the needs of your surrounding, your context, and your community. Another very important point is that the people held the leader accountable and could recall the leader if they did not deliver. I come from Kenya, and a lot of times we feel like recalling our leaders, but we don't really put this to the end. In the African context, if you didn't deliver, the people have a right to and power to say you are not delivering as a leader. So, as I conclude, spiritual leadership in Africa should address another two fundamental issues. Are the religious leaders abiding by the principles of spiritual leadership? And since leadership is exercised in everyday life by all, who instills and how are spiritual leadership principles inculcated accordingly? If spiritual principles prevail in leadership in Africa, there would be a much better society, because we could always remember that we are not of ourselves, we are not of our own, but we owe it to a power that is greater than ourselves. We owe it to different segments of our society, and we owe it for the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Professor Mary. What I notice is that leadership is an everyday exercise. Thank you so much. And then we are going to move forward with Father George Nembunzu.
Merci pour la parole. Je suis Père Georges Mizingi Nembunzu, prêtre de l'ordre de Saint-Augustin, originaire de la République démocratique du Congo. Actuellement, je fais mon doctorat à KU Leuven sur la décolonisation de la théologie africaine, en m'inspirant fondamentalement du théologien congolais Oscar Bimoy Kweshi. Je parlerai ici des fondements théologiques d'un leader porteur d'espérance en Afrique. Je me souviendrai toujours d'une observation d'un de mes professeurs, celui des statistiques, lorsque j'étudiais la philosophie. Après un devoir à domicile, il m'a dit « Tu as bien répondu, mais tu n'as pas répondu correctement. » En effet, même si j'avais bien suivi les étapes du devoir qu'il nous avait donné, c'est dont il était content, parce que j'avais démontré d'une connaissance de la matière. Je m'étais trompé d'exercice. Ce n'était pas l'exercice qu'il m'avait donné. À d'autres termes, j'avais résolu un problème, mais je n'avais pas résolu le problème, c'est-à-dire celui que le professeur nous avait donné. Dans la vie, souvent, le défi, c'est de répondre bien et correctement. Et cela, je pense, s'applique aussi à la théologie, surtout dans notre cadre, quand on réfléchit théologiquement en ou autour de l'Afrique. Bien faire la théologie autour de l'Afrique signifierait alors suivre toutes les méthodologies et aussi suivre les normes d'une science théologique. Mais en même temps, répondre correctement, je voudrais aussi l'interpréter comme s'attaquer aux vrais problèmes de l'Afrique. Parce que aussi longtemps que la théologie naviguera loin des vrais problèmes de l'Afrique, elle pourra difficilement apporter une contribution significative afin que l'Église puisse exercer un leadership transformationnel, un leadership porteur d'espérance au milieu de milliers de personnes qui ont mis leur confiance en elle. C'est vrai que des milliers de personnes ont confiance à l'Église. Cela s'est traduit par exemple par ce fait insolite qui s'est vérifié dans mon pays, la République démocratique du Congo, à l'assassinat du président Laurent Désiré Kabila. Il y a des gens qui ont souhaité que le feu cardinal Mosengo puisse devenir président de la République. Même si c'était un rêve qui n'avait pas d'avenir, mais cela montrait qu'ils pensaient, qu'ils espéraient qu'avoir un prélat catholique aurait pu réellement transformer notre pays. Ma présentation voudrait reconstruire donc les fondements théologiques de ces leaderships transformationnels. Je partirai de la critique des théologies dites les théologies missionnaires, c'est-à-dire théologie du salut des âmes et de l'implantation de l'Église. La théologie du salut des âmes, c'est cette théologie développée à l'époque coloniale par des missionnaires étrangers. C'était une théologie qui cherchait avant tout le salut des Africains. Les Africains qui vivaient dans l'ombre de la mort et qui étaient sous les griffes du Satan. C'est cela qui explique le fait que les traditions, les cultures africaines ont été écartées parce qu'elles considérées comme ou immorale ou satanique, la fameuse politique des tabula rasa. À cette critique, on pourrait faire à cette étape de la théologie, on pourrait faire deux critiques. La première concerne la non-valorisation et le manque d'attention pour le cheminement spirituel propre au peuple africain, pour les aspirations fondamentales des Africains sur leurs attentes. Leurs pratiques culturelles et religieuses ne souffrent pas seulement de manque d'attention, mais subir également, comme je l'ai déjà dit, une politique de tabula rasa. La deuxième critique a trait à l'indifférence à la situation concrète ou matérielle des peuples africains, qui s'est fondée en fait sur une anthropologie dualiste. Et il y avait un corps et une âme, et il y avait clairement une préférence pour l'âme. Et cela explique par exemple, pendant cette époque, il n'y a pratiquement pas d'œuvre théologique qui s'est préoccupé de ces nombreux Africains qui ont été victimes de la colonisation. Dans mon pays, la République démocratique du Congo, il y a eu par exemple ce qu'on appelle les caoutchoucs rouges, où il y a eu beaucoup de Congolais qui ont eu leurs membres amputés. Après cette théologie du salut des âmes, il y a eu la théologie de l'implantation de l'Église avec une préoccupation plus ecclésiologique qui voulait répliquer en Afrique une Église sur le modèle occidental, réplique d'un modèle unique au nom d'une certaine conception de la catholicité ou de l'universalité de l'Église. Eh bien, ces deux théologies, nous voyons qu'elles témoignent d'une ignorance et même d'une marginalisation de la situation africaine, du contexte africain. Dans une perspective, disons-le, européocentrique, l'Afrique n'était pas pensée pour elle-même. Les réflexions théologiques étaient peut-être bonnes, elles étaient peut-être orthodoxes, mais ce n'étaient pas les réflexions justes pour l'Afrique. C'est ainsi qu'il s'est dessiné la nécessité de répartir de l'Afrique, et nous comprenons alors la naissance de la théologie africaine. De nos jours, je crois que la théologie et aussi l'Église ont tout intérêt à partir de la situation concrète des peuples africains. Des situations dont on pourrait même avoir honte de parler dans les contextes internationaux comme ceci, parce que nous avons peur de sembler bizarres ou de sembler encore loin de l'idéal chrétien. Mais souvenons-nous à ce sujet, le pape François a parlé de la grâce de la honte, une honte salvatrice qui amène à demander pardon et à orienter les énergies vers la guérison. Dieu, lui, n'a pas honte de nos péchés. Il nous invite même au dialogue. Venez et discutons. Dites-nous quels sont vos problèmes. Si vos péchés sont rouges comme l'écarlate, je les rendrai blancs comme la neige. Isaïe 1,18. Dieu n'a pas horreur de nos problèmes, si graves et si laids puissent-ils être. Ces problèmes pourraient même soulever un sentiment d'indignation qui pourrait en réalité constituer un ferment pour la pensée théologique. Qu'a-t-on fait et que peut-on faire à partir de l'indignation qui suscite la souffrance en Afrique? Comment cette indignation peut-elle fédérer les forces et orienter la foi chrétienne afin qu'elle constitue vraiment un message d'espérance? Bien que le leadership de l'Église soit fondamentalement spirituel, elle passe aussi par une prise en considération avec le détachement, la froideur nécessaire du vécu quotidien des Africains, l'heure déjà là. Aussi bien dans sa beauté que dans sa laideur et ses horreurs, on doit prendre ces points-là comme un locus theologicus. Il s'agit de dépasser une certaine anthropologie dualiste et déséquilibrée et souvent subtile, où on se concentre plus sur le spirituel, fermant les yeux sur le physique, sur le matériel. En réfléchissant donc sur le salut de l'homme africain, il serait donc indiqué de développer une eschatologie qui ne ferme pas ses yeux sur les déjà là, sur la dimension immanente du salut. Le cardinal ce matin nous parlait d'une théologie de l'incarnation dont on aurait besoin en Afrique. Et évidemment, nous n'allons pas négliger la dimension au-delà de ce monde, la dimension du salut au-delà de ce monde. Développer une théologie belle, orthodoxe, respectueuse de la méthodologie, oui, mais pour quelle fin en Afrique? Et merci son éminence, pour ces beaux mots que vous nous avez donnés, que la théologie puisse descendre de la chair et toucher la poussière de nos rues. Et ici, nous devons donc aussi dépasser cette dichotomie entre une théologie qui se pense plus belle, plus ingénieuse, plus cultivée, plus spéculative, et de l'autre côté, la pastorale. Réfléchissons donc bien, mais réfléchissons aussi correctement sur et autour de l'Afrique, tel que me l'a indiqué mon devoir de statistique. Je conclurai en reprenant des mots que nos cardinaux nous ont donnés. Hier, le cardinal Ignace a parlé d'écouter, un théologien qui écoute, et le cardinal Ambongo a dit écouter profondément le cri de l'homme africain. Que puisse la théologie donc, dans ses compétences, offrir à la pastorale des éléments qui puissent aider vraiment à porter les problèmes des Africains de telle sorte que l'Église finalement puisse exercer un leadership qui puisse transformer le contexte africain. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Père Georges, déjà pour le respect du temps et ce partage ô combien profond. Alors, je vais passer quelques annonces avant de passer la parole au cardinal. Nous avons une fiche qui circule en ce moment pour les personnes qui ont besoin d'une SIM. Donc, vous avez juste à mettre votre nom et il y a quelqu'un qui se chargera de vous avoir cette puce. Aussi, au niveau des casques, écoute, remettez-les avant que de sortir. Même pour le déjeuner, vous devez remettre. Et puis quand vous revenez, vous reprenez parce qu'il est facile d'oublier cela dans son sac. Et aussi dire qu'au fond de la salle, nous avons un médecin. Ça veut dire si vous êtes pris d'un malaise, si vous ne vous sentez pas bien, vous pouvez juste aller tout au fond là. Le médecin est là. OK. Donc, je repasse la parole à la sœur Agnès.
OK. Merci pour votre patience. Nous avons beaucoup débordé aujourd'hui. Normalement, après ces interventions, nous devrions ouvrir une liste de palabres. Mais vu la fatigue et puis la faim qui sont là, nous avons essayé de modifier un peu le programme. Si vous voulez bien, nous allons, après que son éminence nous ait donné la dernière parole, la bénédiction, nous diriger vers la salle de repas pour le repas à 14h. À 15h, nous reprendrons avec les sessions simultanées, comme ce que nous avons fait hier. 15h, nous aurons 2 sessions simultanées. La première qui sera sur la présentation des recherches et propositions de bonnes pratiques de leadership transformationnel qui va rester ici, dans cette salle. La deuxième session simultanée qui est sur le futur de l'Afrique et la diaspora, le futur de la théologie, la diaspora, qui sera dans la salle où était la deuxième session hier. Donc à 15h, nous nous retrouvons déjà pour les sessions simultanées. À 16h30, nous reviendrons ici pour la présentation des posters des jeunes sur leurs activités. À 16h30 jusqu'à 17h30. Après cette étape, nous allons ouvrir la palabre sur les thèmes de cette fin de matinée. Je ne sais pas si j'ai été claire. Donc maintenant, nous partons pour le repas. Et à 15h, nous nous retrouvons dans les salles pour la session simultanée jusqu'à 16h30 où nous reviendrons ici ensemble pour continuer. Merci beaucoup pour votre patience. Je repasse la parole à son éminence pour un dernier mot et la bénédiction avant que nous ayons pour le repas. Merci.
Je crois pour le moment, tout le monde a faim. On va bénir le repas à partir d'ici. Et d'ici, on va seulement pour manger. Au nom du Père et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit, Seigneur notre Dieu, nous te rendons grâce, toi qui as été avec nous tout au long de cette matinée. Dans ton amour, tu te préoccupes des hommes, tu leur donnes de la nourriture pour refaire leur force. Bénis le repas que ta bonté nous donne, toi qui vis et règnes pour les siècles de siècles. Amen. Bon appétit.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you.